Chapter 23:17. Shao Chun had always felt that the evil warriors were plotting something in secret. Shao Chun had been trying to guess the evil warriors' purpose, but he had never been able to figure it out. But now, in Shao Chun's opinion, no matter what the evil warriors' purpose was, as an enemy, the vast thousand world would not give them a chance to succeed. Shao Chun had always felt that the evil warriors were plotting something in secret. Shao Chun had always been trying to guess the evil warrior's purpose, but he had never been able to figure it out. But now, in Shao Chun's opinion, no matter what the evil warrior's purpose was, as an enemy, the vast thousand world would not give them a chance to succeed. If he couldn't figure it out, then he might as well not. Anyway, the vast thousand world would just focus on destroying the evil warriors and not letting them succeed. After hearing Shao Chun's words, the emperors present did not directly refute him. Instead, they fell into deep thought. After a while, it was still the skinny old man who spoke first. "This little guy is right. Instead of sitting here and waiting for death, it's better to take the initiative to attack. In any case, this battle is inevitable." The skinny old man was the first to agree with Shao Chun's idea. Jun Weia also spoke at this time. "I also agree." The two emperors agreed with Shao Chun one after another. Then, Dao Xiong, Xiao Shao, and several other emperors also spoke one after another. In the end, although Tao Ming was very unhappy with Shao Chun, in the face of such a situation, he could only choose to acquiesce. Of course, this was also because there was nothing wrong with Shao Chun's idea. In fact, in the hearts of the emperors, this idea had long been in the minds of the emperors. After all, the evil warriors had not made any moves, so they naturally could not wait forever. His idea was supported by most of the emperors. Shao Chun returned to his seat, and the next matter was up to the emperor ancestors to decide. In the end, after a discussion, the emperors decided on the spot that they would attack the Flame Wind realm tomorrow. As for the other two sealed places, they would leave people to guard them. If there were any changes, they would report it immediately. The other two sealed lands had not appeared for a long time, and the emperors had obviously found it strange. After the meeting, Shao Chun, Dao Ju, Xiao Shao, and the others returned to their residence. Since they were going to attack the Fiery Wind realm tomorrow, Shao Chun and the others naturally had to accompany them. Although Shao Chun and the rest were from the younger generation, with Shao Chun's strength, as long as they did not encounter the evil dominator, there would not be any problems. Therefore, to the Great Thousand World, Shao Chun and the rest of the Supreme Talents were also a rare force, and naturally, they would enter the Flaming Wind world together. At his residence, Shao Chun told Gu Lingyao, Tian Yu, and Hong Xiu about the attack on the Flame Wind realm tomorrow. At the same time, he also sent a letter to Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling to inform them. Soon, Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing also replied, saying that they would reach the western Liang Plains tonight. The war was about to begin, but the Great Thousand World would take the initiative to attack. At the same time, the battlefield was set in the Flame Wind realm. In fact, just as Shao Chun said, setting the battlefield in the Flame Wind realm was not a bad thing for the Great Thousand World. After all, a war of such a scale would naturally have a shocking destructive power. If it was set in the Great Thousand World, it would definitely have a great impact on the Great Thousand World. However, if the battlefield was set in the Flame Wind realm, the emperors would not have to worry about the consequences, because even if the entire Flame Wind realm was destroyed, the impact on the Great Thousand World would be almost negligible, so it would not matter much. At night, Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling arrived at the western Liang Plains safely. After successfully breaking through to the End Realm, the two's combat strength had obviously increased by a lot. The three siblings gathered again, and Shao Chun also briefly explained the current situation to the two of them. Hearing this, Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling also listened seriously. The night was silent. The order to attack the Flame Wind realm had already been issued the day before. Therefore, early the next morning, on the western Liang Plains, the experts of the various sects of the Great Thousand World quickly gathered together. According to the various sects, many experts boarded the spaceship. One after another, the spaceships rose into the sky. Under the gaze of Junhua, Dao Xiong, the other emperors and Tenzu, they slowly entered the space tunnel. It had to be said that such a scene was extremely shocking. The spaceships covered the sky, and there were probably tens of thousands of them. On each spaceship sat many experts of the Great Thousand World. Like the others, Shao Chun and the others boarded the spaceship of the Sword Sect. As one of the 10 great Lingtian sects, the Sword Sect naturally sent out many experts this time, a total of 50 to 60,000 people. About 60 spaceships rose into the sky, and Shao Chun, Song Xing, and the other higher-ups of the Sword Sect stood on the deck. They also flew toward the space tunnel of the Flame Wind Realm. With all the forces and experts of the Great Thousand World gathered together, the force that erupted was obviously not to be underestimated. Now that this force had entered the Flame Wind Realm, it also meant that the prelude to the battle between good and evil had begun once again. The low sound of war drums rang out continuously, and for a moment, the solemn atmosphere before the battle quickly spread in everyone's hearts. After the discussion of the emperors yesterday, the Sword Sect, as the representative of the vanguard, was the first to enter the Flame Wind Realm, opening the way for the experts of the other forces. In fact, as the first force to enter the Fiery Wind World, the pressure on the Sword's Gate was naturally the greatest. Needless to say, since the Great Thousand World had set up layers of defense around the spatial passageway, the evil cultivators would do the same. Therefore, as the vanguard, the Sword Sect was naturally under the greatest pressure. However, after the Sword Sect, the experts of the Saber Sect and the Moon Palace followed closely behind, followed by the other forces. The spaceship that Shao Chun and the others were on was the first to enter the space tunnel, slowly disappearing under everyone's gaze. The space tunnel was filled with void storms, and Shao Chun and the others were also resting with their eyes closed in the spaceship. The atmosphere was somewhat oppressive, but there was no other way. Everyone knew that once they exited the space tunnel, they would obviously be facing a great battle. After an unknown period of time, the experts of the Sword Sect sent news that they were about to leave the space tunnel and arrive at the Flame Wind Realm. After receiving the news, Shao Chun and the others also came to the deck one after another. From afar they could see a white dot of light. As it drew closer, the dot of light grew larger. It was clear that this dot of light was the exit of the space tunnel, the entrance to the Flame Wind Realm. As they got closer and closer to the exit, the tens of thousands of experts of the Sword Sect on the spaceships were already prepared for battle. The spaceship that Shao Chun and the others were on was the first to rush out of the space tunnel and arrive at the Flame Wind Realm again. However, after Shao Chun and the others left the space tunnel, the first thing that Shao Chun saw was an array of evil path cultivators on standby. There were as many as hundreds of thousands of them. Sure enough, Zishi and the others had also set up a heavy defense outside the space tunnel. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 23:18. As the vanguard, the Sword Sect was the first to rush out of the space passage and arrive at the Flaming Wind Realm. However, what appeared before Shao Chun and the others were more than 100,000 evil path cultivators. As the vanguard, the Sword Sect was the first to rush out of the space passage and arrive at the Flaming Wind Realm. However, what appeared before Shao Chun and the others were more than 100,000 evil path cultivators. Seeing Shao Chun and the others appear, the evil path cultivators did not hesitate at all. Immediately, a strong blood chi soared into the sky. Originally, these evil path cultivators had been resurrected using a secret technique. They didn't have any intelligence. They only knew to listen to the orders of Purple Snake and the other evil sovereigns. and Purple Snake and the other evil sovereign's orders were to guard the spatial channel to the death. No matter who it was, as long as they appeared from the spatial channel, they were to kill without mercy. Therefore, the evil path cultivators immediately launched an attack, rushing towards Xiao Chun and the others from all directions. Seeing this, Xiao Chen also shouted in a low voice, "Kill them!" Then, he took the lead and charged forward. As the vanguard, the Sword Sect's mission was obviously the final and most dangerous because they were the first to face the evil path cultivators. They were also the first to rush to the front. However, this was the decision of the sovereigns after all, so Xiao Chun had no reason to refuse. Immediately, following Xiao Chen's command, the experts of the Sword Sect on the dozens of starships also rushed towards the evil path cultivators. The battle between good and evil that had been stagnant for an unknown number of years had once again begun. In terms of numbers, the Sword Sect was obviously far inferior to the evil path cultivators. The Sword Sect had a total of 50 to 60,000 people, but these people were the elites of the Sword Sect. Ordinary disciples were not qualified to participate in such a battle. Only the inner sect disciples were qualified to participate in such a battle. There was an obvious disadvantage in terms of numbers. Most importantly, these evil path cultivators did not know how to think and did not know how to be timid, let alone retreat. However, at the same time, the Sword Sect could not retreat. As the vanguard, the Sword Sect's mission was to block the attacks of the evil path cultivators and successfully occupy the space outside the space passage to open a path for the other sects who arrived later. This would allow the experts of the Great Thousand World to occupy a place in the Flaming Wind realm. They definitely could not retreat. Once they retreated, the experts of the other sects who arrived later would have no place to stand. Therefore, even though there was a clear disparity in numbers, Xiao Chun still pressed forward and took the lead in slaughtering the evil warriors. Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling on his left and right and Xianyuan Ling. Kill! Xiao Chun shouted angrily after killing an evil path cultivator with one sword. Hearing this, the disciples of the Sword Sect were also fearless and charged towards the evil path cultivators. As the newly promoted 10 sword head disciples, Qin Kunlun and the others also charged at the front and received the recognition of the 10 Sons sword. In addition to the full support of the Sword Sect during this period of time, Qin Kunlun and the others' cultivation had also improved by leaps and bounds. Although they were surrounded by many evil path cultivators, Qin Kunlun and the others were still fearless. As the first sword head disciple, Qin Kunlun's body shone with golden light. The first sword in his hand also exuded an endless majestic aura. It was as if an emperor had descended and continuously reaped the lives of the evil path cultivators. Junior brotherly, this time you can't be lazy anymore. Otherwise, when the sect leader blames you, it probably won't be something that the cliff of reflection can solve. Qin Kunlun said to Li Suifeng with a smile as he killed an immortal Emperor Realm evil path cultivator. Qin Kunlun was domineering and awe-inspiring. He had long become the idol of countless disciples of the Sword Sect. However, compared to the first sword head disciple Qin Kunlun, the second Li Suifeng was much more ordinary. Although Li Suifeng was also killing enemies, he didn't give off the impression that Qin Kunlun gave off. He looked very ordinary and didn't stand out in the slightest. Hearing Qin Kunlun's words, Li Suifeng didn't take it to heart. He sighed slightly and said, "Sigh, this is really an eventful period. Why did the sect leader have to be the vanguard?" Li Suifeng looked a little helpless. After all, the vanguard was the most dangerous. This was something that everyone knew. However, the Sword Sect had now become the vanguard. It was easy to imagine the pressure of having to face more than 100,000 evil path cultivators alone. As soon as Li Suifeng finished speaking, some of the Sword Sect's disciples had already fallen. It couldn't be helped. As long as it was a battle, there would definitely be casualties. This was especially true when there were hundreds of thousands of people on both sides. The evil path cultivators were killed, and the sword sect's disciples were also injured. Hearing Li Suifeng's words, Lu Qingyao also killed an evil path cultivator with a single sword strike. Then, she said with a cold expression, "Cut the crap. Save your strength to kill the enemies." Lu Qingyao unconsciously looked at Xiao Chen in the distance. At this moment, Xiao Chen was surrounded by thousands of evil path cultivators. However, even though he was surrounded, Xiao Chen's expression didn't change at all. Countless blood swords revolved around him. Sword qi filled the sky. One by one, the evil path cultivators fell under Xiao Chen's sword. Looking at Xiao Chen, Lu Qingyao's face turned slightly red. Seeing this, Li Suifeng smiled bitterly and said, Okay. Save your strength to kill the enemies. However, junior sister Lu, can you stop thinking about love for now? You. Lu Qingyao's face turned even redder when Li Suifeng saw through her thoughts. However, at this moment, an evil path cultivator attacked. Lu Qingyao had no choice but to face the enemy head-on. As the vanguard, the sword sect was already prepared. Under the leadership of Xiao Chen, they didn't have the slightest bit of fear. However, there was still a huge disparity in numbers after all. Those inner sect disciples who were not outstanding in strength were indeed unable to fend off the attacks of so many evil warriors. It was indeed difficult for them to fend off the attacks of so many evil warriors. At the same time, seeing their companions fall one by one, some of the more timid inner sect disciples began to feel afraid. An inner sect disciple looked on helplessly as several of his companions were torn apart by the evil path cultivators. His eyes were filled with fear, and his body seemed to be uncontrollably frozen on the spot. Facing the attacks of two evil path cultivators, this inner sect disciple was stunned and didn't know what to do. He was obviously frightened. It couldn't be helped. For these ordinary inner sect disciples, perhaps they had never experienced such a bloody battle before. It should be known that these evil path cultivators were monsters without intelligence. They didn't fear death and only knew how to kill. Just as this inner sect disciple was about to be killed, a black shadow flashed by and killed the two evil path cultivators, saving the inner sect disciple's life. Then, an indifferent voice sounded. "If you're afraid, then get back to the starship." After saying that, the black shadow rushed into the encirclement of the evil path cultivators and started a massacre. Hearing the black shadow's words, the inner sect disciple's expression changed slightly. Sect master, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 23:19. The attacker was none other than Xiao Chen. Along the way, Xiao Chen had saved many disciples of the Sword's Gate. Some of these disciples were besieged by the evil cultivators and were unable to fight against so many. Some of them were like this inner disciple, scared out of their wits. In fact, Xiao Chen didn't mean to blame these disciples. After all, many of the Sword Sect disciples hadn't participated in a battle of this scale before. One must know that although the Sword Sect and Heavenly Sect had been fighting for many years and both sides had fought many times, the situation this time was completely different from when they faced the evil warriors and Heavenly Sect. Or rather, it was much more tragic. Especially these evil warriors, each one of them did not have a mind of their own. Their actions were like walking corpses, and their killing methods were extremely bloody. Many inner sect disciples were torn to pieces by these evil warriors. Such a scene was too shocking for these inner sect disciples. It was inevitable that they would feel a chill in their hearts. However, now that they were on the battlefield, Xiao Chen naturally didn't have the time and energy to slowly enlighten them. He could only use the most direct method. Seeing Xiao Chen kill his way into the evil warriors alone, this inner sect disciple pursed his lips tightly. He recalled Xiao Chen's words and immediately clenched his teeth and continued to attack the evil warriors. As time passed, the battle became more and more intense. The sword sect had no way out, and the evil warriors wouldn't back down either. Both sides killed each other. However, there was a huge difference in the number of people on both sides. The difference was more than double. Under such a huge difference in numbers, the sword sect gradually fell into a disadvantage. One must know that in such a battle with hundreds of thousands of people, no matter how strong Shao Chen was, it was difficult for him to affect the entire battle. Moreover, the evil warriors also had End Realm expert. A sword sect disciple had to face at least 2 evil warriors. As such, the pressure on the sword sect was naturally huge. It was also because of this that the casualties of the sword sect started to increase. The originally injured disciples were killed by the evil warriors because of Chongshan. Even the elders started to fall. The casualties were getting more and more obvious. However, at this moment, hundreds of space warships appeared from the space tunnel. They were from the Saber sect and the Moon Palace. The Sword sect was the vanguard, while the Saber sect and the Moon Palace followed closely behind. The experts of the Saber sect stood on the deck and looked at the intense battle around them. Dao Ju revealed a smile and said, "This time, it's really difficult for the Sword sect." With just a glance, he could see how fierce the Sword sect was. Saber sect's vice sect leader said. Sect's vice sect leader. Nonsense. If we still want to fight among ourselves at this moment, won't we be seeking our own destruction? Dao Ju immediately cried out coldly when he heard this. He then shouted angrily, "Kill!" Following Dao Ju's words, the experts of the Saber sect also joined in the battle. At the same time, the experts of the Moon Palace also attacked. With the Saber sect and the Moon Palace joining in, the pressure on the Sword sect was naturally reduced. Dao Ju and Xiao Xiao also quickly charged to Shao Chen's side. Looking at Shao Chen, Dao Ju laughed heartlessly. "See, I told you not to accept this vanguard mission. You're just sending yourself to your death." In fact, when Shao Chen first received the vanguard mission, Dao Ju had told Shao Chen not to accept it. However, Shao Chen didn't agree. Indeed, Dao Ju was right. Because they were the vanguard, the sword sect's casualties were very serious. However, Shao Chen didn't regret it. He just said indifferently, "Someone has to accept it. Moreover, at this time, if we still have ulterior motives, won't we be digging our own graves?" Shao Chen naturally knew that this vanguard mission would cause heavy casualties to the sword sect. However, there was no other way. This time, in order to deal with the evil path, although the major forces of the Great Thousand World had temporarily formed an alliance, there were many internal problems in this alliance. Among the 10 great Ling Tian sects, who didn't have their own ulterior motives. These ulterior motives, or rather, schemes against each other, were definitely the most dangerous. If things went wrong, the evil path might not even need to act. The Great Thousand World would collapse on its own. Therefore, the reason why Shao Chen accepted the mission of being the vanguard this time was to show the rest of the Lingtian sects that if they wanted to defeat the evil martial artists, everyone had to be united. It was best to put away those petty thoughts that they shouldn't have. Someone had to pay the price. If you don't accept it, who will be the vanguard? Moreover, it was said that it was Tao Ming who suggested that the sword sect be the vanguard this time. How could Shao Chen not guess this guy's thoughts? Since Shao Chen was the one who suggested taking the initiative to attack, then I think the sword sect should be the vanguard this time. This was what Tao Ming said in front of the emperors, and Shao Chen did not refuse. Hearing Shao Chen's words, Dao Ju also sighed and said, "Sigh, if only some people could think like you." Needless to say, the some people that Dao Ju mentioned were naturally Tao Ming and Yang Chen. This time, the Coiling Heaven sect would be the vanguard. This way, it could be said that they would enter the Flame Wind realm without suffering any injuries. This was because by the time the Coiling Heaven sect passed through the space passage, the battle would probably have already ended. Speaking up to here, Dao Ju paused for a moment, then said to Xiao Chen, "All right, have your sword sect's wounded withdraw. Xiao and I will handle the rest." Many of the sword sect's disciples had died, and the number of injured disciples was even greater. Hearing Dao Ju's words, Xiao Chen did not refuse and immediately told Song Xing to return the injured disciples to the starship for treatment. With the Saber Sect and Moon Palace's experts joining the battle, the Sword Sect did not have to fight so desperately, especially those injured disciples who urgently needed medical attention. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Song Xing naturally nodded and agreed without any hesitation. Previously, Song Xing's heart was bleeding as he watched his disciples die one by one. These disciples were the Sword Sect's treasures, and the death of even one was a loss to the Sword Sect. At this moment, after receiving Xiao Chen's order, Song Xing naturally hurriedly went to make arrangements. Soon, the Sword Sect's disciples returned to the starship one by one, and the Saber Sect and Moon Palace's disciples took their place in the battle. Facing the Sword Sect's disciples who were gradually retreating from the battlefield, the Saber Sect and Moon Palace's disciples did not ridicule them at all. Instead, they smiled and nodded with respect. Naturally, the Saber Sect and Moon Palace's disciples saw everything that the Sword Sect's disciples had done, so they naturally did not object to them leaving the battle at this moment. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 23:20. All the injured disciples of the Sword Sect retreated from the battlefield. At this moment, a group of hundreds of injured disciples of the Sword Sect were preparing to leave the battlefield. However, a group of evil warriors broke free from the Saber Sect and Moon Palace's disciples and charged towards the Sword Sect's disciples. Seeing this, the Sword Sect's disciples had no choice but to grit their teeth and prepare to fight. However, Qin Kunlun and the others arrived in time and stopped the evil warriors. Senior Brother Qin, Senior Brother Li, seeing Qin Kunlun and the others, the Sword Sect's disciples shouted. Hearing this, Qin Kunlun attacked while saying in a deep voice, "Hurry up and leave." Qin Kunlun and the others were not injured and had no intention of retreating from the battle. They had already covered the retreat of the Sword Sect's disciples. Hearing Qin Kunlun's words, the Sword Sect's disciples quickly turned around and left the battlefield. Although Qin Kunlun and the others were only human, their combat strength was not weak. In addition, they had a divine weapon like the 10 Children's Sword. The evil warriors of the same realm were no match for them at all. They still intended to continue the bloody battle, but there was one exception. With the addition of the Saber Sect and Moon Palace, the pressure on the Sword Sect was greatly reduced. At this time, Li Suifeng's old habit acted up again and he began to slack off. In the face of an evil warrior who was only at the initial stage of the comprehension realm, Li Suifeng fought with him for more than 100 moves, and there was no clear victor. Li Suifeng's cultivation was at the great circle of the comprehension realm, and his combat strength was comparable to that of a Dao realm expert. However, when facing an evil warrior who was only at the initial stage of the comprehension realm, Li Suifeng could actually fight with him for more than 100 moves. He was obviously going easy on his opponent. Li Suifeng was slacking off leisurely, but at this moment, a bright light flashed and the evil warrior who was fighting with Li Suifeng was killed. Then, Qin Kunlun appeared in front of Li Suifeng and said helplessly, "Li Suifeng, if you continue to slack off like this, I will tell the sect master." In the face of such a powerful enemy, Li Suifeng still wanted to slack off. This made Qin Kunlun angry and helpless. However, just as Qin Kunlun finished speaking, a burst of laughter suddenly sounded. "Haha, you are the Sword Sect's #1 disciple, Qin Kunlun?" Along with the voice, 4 young men and women of the Saber Sect appeared before Qin Kunlun. The one who spoke was a handsome young man with a black saber on his back. When he saw the 10 young men appear, Qin Kunlun immediately recognized their identities and softly said, "Disciples of the Saber Disciple." Sword sects saber sect and saber sects disciples as sabers saber childrens of. And sabers saber sect and the sword saber sect and saber sect and saber sect and saber sect and also saber sect were disciples too. And sword disciples and sword sect and saber childrens and saber sect and disciples. Seeing that Qin Kunlun had recognized his identity, the young man with the black saber smiled and said, "That's right, I am Bai Mo. You should know me." Bai Mo, hearing this name, Qin Kunlun's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. At the same time, the first sword in his hand let out a sword cry. Then, Qin Kunlun said with a smile on his face, "Of course I have heard of you. I have admired the number one disciple of the Saber sect for a long time. It is a pity that I have not had the chance to learn from you." His words were filled with fighting spirit. As the number one disciple of the Sword sect, Qin Kunlun and Bai Mo were natural competitors. After becoming the number one disciple, Qin Kunlun had specially collected information about Bai Mo. Although it was the first time they had met, Qin Kunlun knew Bai Mo very well. He knew Bai Mo's life story like the back of his hand. Similarly, Bai Mo was the same for Qin Kunlun. Knowing that the Sword sect had once again established the top 10 sword fanatics, Bai Mo had also specially learned about Qin Kunlun. He knew that Qin Kunlun was a talented person who lived up to his reputation. The two looked at each other and sparks seemed to fly in the air. At this time, a lazy young man beside Bai Mo stood up and said, "Why don't you two fight here?" The young man's name was Zhang Luanqing. He was ranked second among the top 10 saber disciples. Zhang Luanqing also looked lazily at Li Suifeng beside Qin Kunlun and said with a smile on his face, "Li Suifeng." Hearing Zhang Luanqing's words, everyone thought that the two of them were going to be like Qin Kunlun and Bai Mo. However, no one thought that Zhang Luanqing would suddenly say, "Why don't we find a place to spar?" His voice was extremely lazy. Hearing this, Li Suifeng actually agreed without thinking. Okay. The two of them agreed to spar, but it seemed that the two of them were not going to spar. They were obviously going to slack off. Looking at the two of them, there was no fighting spirit. Just as Li Suifeng and Bai Mo were about to leave, Lu Qingyao and a beautiful girl beside Zhang Luanqing both shouted, "Stop, if you want to kill the enemy, we can talk about other things later." They almost spoke in unison. Then, the two girls involuntarily glanced at each other, then snorted coldly at the same time and turned their heads away. It was the first time that the top 10 saber disciples and the top 10 sword fanatics met, and the scene became very strange. However, at this time, Qin Kunlun and Bai Mo also spoke one after another. "Let's kill the enemy first, we can talk about other things later." Okay. As they spoke, under the leadership of Qin Kunlun and Bai Mo, both sides joined the battle at the same time. Perhaps there was a faint intention to compete. At this time, both sides used all their strength, and there was no mercy in their attacks. Both of them displayed powerful combat strength, especially Qin Kunlun and Bai Mo. The two of them were like the god of death descending. Wherever they passed, there would be rivers of blood, but no one could stop them. "Haha, Qin Kunlun, I want to fight with you more and more." After killing an evil warrior, Bai Mo looked at Qin Kunlun and laughed loudly. Hearing Bai Mo's words, Qin Kunlun, who had also killed an evil warrior, also smiled and replied, "Same to you. When there is time, I will definitely fight with you." "Okay, it's a deal." Hearing this, Bai Mo's eyes were filled with fighting spirit as he replied. Qin Kunlun and Bai Mo were secretly competing, and Lu Qingyao and the beautiful girl were also doing the same at this time. After killing one person, Lu Qingyao turned to look at the beautiful girl and said coldly, "You must be Zhao Yulin." Zhao Yulin, the third of the top 10 saber disciples, smiled faintly when she heard Lu Qingyao's words. "Yes. Humph, after killing these evil warriors, I want to fight with you." Hearing this, Lu Qingyao snorted coldly. I can't ask for more. Hearing this, Zhao Yulin was not to be outdone. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 23-21. Qin Kuren, by Mo and the rest were secretly competing with each other. Although this was the first time they had met, both sides were obviously competitive. However, there were exceptions, such as Li Suifeng and Zhang Luanqing. The two of them had no intention of competing. On the contrary, they were lazy when they could. The opponents they chose were the weaker evil path martial artists. From the way the two of them fought, it was clear that they had not used their full strength. They even looked lazy from the beginning to the end. This year's top 10 sword fanatics and top 10 saber disciples were indeed interesting. Even their personalities were so similar. The battle continued. With the addition of the Saber Sect and the Moon Palace, the Great Thousand World gradually gained the upper hand. After all, Zishi and the rest did not place all the evil path martial artists here. It could even be said that the evil path martial artists guarding the space tunnel were only a small part. The real power of the evil path martial artists was gathered in the Flaming Wind realm. It was not difficult to guess that Zishi and the rest had not thought of blocking the Great Thousand World martial artists outside the Flaming Wind realm. In other words, they had already planned to fight to the death in the Flaming Wind realm with the Great Thousand World. Just as the battle was getting more intense, more than 10 terrifying blood qis came from afar. Zishi, Yen Tong and the rest of the evil masters appeared. The evil dominator appeared. However, at the same time, Jun Wuya and the others quickly appeared in the space tunnel, facing off against Zishi and the others. The sovereigns could already pass through the space tunnel without relying on starships or space spirit boat. With the appearance of the evil master and the sovereigns, the battle really entered a white-hot stage. It was the first time they had faced so many evil masters. Except for Jun Wuya, Dao Xiong and Luo Xing, the rest of the sovereigns looked grave. To them, the evil master seemed familiar, but he was also very unfamiliar. This was because they had never fought with him before. They were familiar with him because there were many ancient books in the Great Thousand World that recorded the Great War between the good and evil. It was enough to show how tragic the war was. Both sides faced off against each other. As for the battle between the Overlord and the evil Overlord, the others naturally couldn't intervene. Therefore, whether it was Shao Chun or the other evil warriors, none of them had the intention to attack the Overlord and the evil Overlord. Zishi's gaze naturally fell on Jun Wuya. Sensing Zishi's gaze, Jun Wuya's expression did not change. Yen Tong also followed Zishi's gaze and focused on Jun Wuya. At the same time, she muttered softly, "He's Jun Wuya?" Hearing Yen Tong's words, Zishi nodded his head slightly. Fear flashed in his eyes unconsciously. When he saw Jun Wuya again, Zishi discovered that he did not have much fighting spirit. Perhaps it was because he knew that Jun Wuya's combat strength was very strong, or perhaps he knew that he had no chance of winning. Therefore, Zishi did not have many thoughts about Jun Wuya. This was because Zishi already knew the result before they even fought. However, Yen Tong did not think so. He sized up Jun Wuya and a fighting spirit gradually appeared in his eyes. Moreover, this fighting spirit was getting stronger. Although he had heard from Zishi that Jun Wuya's combat strength was very strong, and Zishi had even compared Jun Wuya to the evil god, Yen Tong was not convinced by Zishi's words. Therefore, this time, Yen Tong was determined to personally experience whether Jun Wuya's combat strength was really comparable to the evil gods. Thinking of this, Yen Tong no longer suppressed the fighting spirit in his heart. His gaze was fixed on Jun Wuya. Yen Tong said with a cold smile, "It seems that the Great Thousand World can't wait any longer. Why? Are you in a hurry to die?" Tenzu snorted when he heard Yen Tong's words. "Humph, I didn't kill you back then, but I didn't expect that there would be a day when you would be able to turn the tables. Tenzu was the only one present who had participated in the battle between the good and evil. Yen Tong and the other evil sovereigns were also very familiar with the Sky Clan. Yen Tong sneered when he heard Tenzu's words. Haha Tenzu, there's no need to say these words. Back then, you gathered the strength of the entire Great Thousand World and were unable to kill us. What can you do now? In order to kill the evil god back then, Tenzu had used all his means, but in the end, he was unable to kill Yen Tong and the other evil sovereigns. Tenzu snorted when he heard Yen Tong's words. However, he was somewhat glad that he had killed the evil god back then. Otherwise, the current situation would be even more dangerous. Tenzu's heart sank when he thought of the evil god. This was indeed an opponent that could make one tremble in fear. Even Tenzu had to admit that he was not as strong as the evil god. Back then, in order to kill Tenzu, the Great Thousand World had mobilized a total of 7 sovereigns. In addition to Tenzu, 8 experts had joined forces to defeat and kill the evil god. However, because of this, 3 of the 7 sovereigns had been killed by the evil god. Even Tenzu could not achieve such a feat. It was undeniable that the evil god's strength had surpassed Tenzu's. Therefore, Tenzu was glad. However, if Tenzu knew that Zishi and the others were trying to revive the evil god, and that the evil god was in the process of rebuilding his physical body, who knew what Tenzu would think? Tenzu did not reply. Seeing this, Yen Tong sneered and shouted, "Cut the crap, let's fight." As he spoke, Zishi and the other evil sovereigns beside Yen Tong began to attack. Seeing this, the sovereigns of the Great Thousand World also did not want to be outdone. In an instant, the battle between the sovereigns and the evil sovereigns broke out. Because of Yen Tong's special instructions, Zishi and the other evil sovereigns did not choose Jun Wuya. Jun Wuya seemed to have guessed Yen Tong's intention, so he did not attack. After everyone had exchanged blows, Jun Wuya and Yen Tong's eyes met in the air. From Yen Tong's body, Jun Wuya felt that he was stronger than Zishi. However, Jun Wuya did not care about this. Zishi was not his opponent and Yen Tong was not his opponent either. At this time, Jun Wuya was wondering if he should kill Yen Tong here. In a one-on-one situation, Jun Wuya could kill Yen Tong. Although he might have to pay a price, it was still within the range that Jun Wuya could bear. Seeing that Jun Wuya seemed to be deep in thought, Yen Tong sneered and said, "You are Jun Wuya? I heard from Zishi that you are very strong. However, I have not seen how strong you are, but your ability to be arrogant is not bad. You still have the mind to think about other things while fighting with me. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 23-22. Yen Tong could clearly feel that Jun Wuya was absent-minded. Yen Tong could feel that Jun Wuya was looking down on him, which made Yen Tong infuriated. Yen Tong could clearly feel that Jun Wuya was absent-minded. Yen Tong could feel that Jun Wuya was looking down on him, which made Yen Tong infuriated. As an evil sovereign, Yen Tong couldn't remember how long it had been since someone dared to look down on him. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that even the heavenly ancestors didn't dare to look down on him. Jun Wuya said indifferently after hearing Yen Tong's words. "Forget it. Although it will be troublesome, I will make you stay here forever. You should be the strongest among them. Killing you will save me a lot of trouble in the future." Jun Wuya's eyes were filled with killing intent as he spoke. Yen Tong was so angry that he laughed when he heard that Jun Wuya was going to kill him on the spot. Good. It has been a long time since I met such an arrogant person. Today, I want to see how you are going to kill me." Yen Tong immediately threw a punch at Jun Wuya. Jun Wuya casually threw out a palm. Yen Tong's attack was easily blocked by Jun Wuya. However, Yen Tong was not surprised at all. He already knew that Jun Wuya was very strong from Violet Snake. Since Violet Snake had praised Jun Wuya, It was not surprising that Junwuya was able to block his punch. A wisp of black flame appeared between Yen Tong and Junwuya. Immediately, wisps of black flame also appeared around Junwuya. Black flames burning the heavens. Yen Tong shouted in a low voice. Then, the black flames surrounding Junwuya burned fiercely and engulfed Junwuya. The reason why Yen Tong was called Yen Tong was because his eyes were capable of summoning hellfire, or in other words, black flames. The black flame's lethality was obviously much higher than ordinary flames. Even an Emperor Realm Master would not dare to underestimate it. Yen Tong did not move, but the black flame had already completely engulfed Junwuya. However, just as the black flames were burning fiercely, a lotus appeared under Junwuya's feet out of thin air. The black flames couldn't even get close to Junwuya, let alone cause any harm to him. Incarnation of the three pure ones. Then, two identical Junwuya slowly appeared on both sides of Junwuya. Seeing Junwuya use the three pure ones' incarnation, Yen Tong's eyes flickered. Thinking back to the war between the righteous and corrupt paths, the sovereign who had comprehended the three pure ones' incarnation had given the corrupt path a headache. Even Violet Snake had been defeated by that sovereign. Although it had been many years, seeing the three pure ones' incarnation again made Yen Tong's heart tighten. However, Yen Tong was not Violet Snake. Although the three pure ones' incarnation was difficult for Violet Snake to deal with, it was still not enough to defeat Yen Tong. After a short while, Yen Tong sneered. If the three pure ones' incarnation is your trump card, then it's a pity that I am not Violet Snake. I am not afraid of the three pure ones' incarnation. Saying that, Yen Tong's eyes were completely occupied by the black flames. His eyes seemed to have turned into flames, burning fiercely. At the same time, Yen Tong shouted in a low voice, "Flame World!" Instantly, countless Yen Tong appeared in the surroundings. These Yen Tong were not afterimages, but formed by the black flames. There were thousands of them, and they looked extremely terrifying. Moreover, what was even more shocking was that these Yen Tong were exuding an aura. Obviously, these thousands of Yen Tong had real offensive power and were not simply used to confuse the opponent. The Flame World was Yen Tong's special skill. It was also the reason why he was able to become one of the three evil sovereigns of the evil way. With this skill, Yen Tong was not too afraid of Junwuya's three pure ones' incarnation. Looking at the Flame World, Junwuya nodded slightly and said, "It is indeed a good skill. However, as you said, this is not enough." Saying that, the three Junwuya sat down cross-legged at the same time, and three flowers appeared under them. At the same time, the sky was covered with dark clouds, and countless black heavenly lightning struck down. Junwuya's black lightning was not inferior to Yen Tong's black flames in terms of offensive power. In fact, it was even more powerful. As the black lightning continued to fall, Yen Tong's doppelgangers were constantly being destroyed. One by one, the incarnations were shattered under Junwuya's black lightning. However, Yen Tong was not nervous at all, because as the incarnations were shattered, new incarnations quickly appeared. The number of incarnations did not decrease because of Junwuya's attack. On the contrary, the number of incarnations increased from thousands to tens of thousands. With so many clones, not to mention their battle prowess, just their appearance alone was enough to frighten people. Their might was indeed enough to make people tremble in fear. Ignoring the black lightning in the sky, the tens of thousands of incarnations of Yen Tong attacked Junwuya. Junwuya was still calm in the face of such a terrifying attack. The three Junwuya started to form seals at the same time and said faintly, "Tens of thousands of incarnations. The power is indeed not bad. However, it is a pity that you are too obsessed with the appearance and forgot the essence." As Junwuya spoke, the petals of the black lotus scattered. At the same time, Junwuya shouted in a low voice, "Lotus kill." As she spoke, the lotus petals that were originally fluttering in the wind seemed to have transformed into sharp knives. They carried a terrifying power as they shot towards Yen Tong. Under Jun Wuya's attack, the incarnations of Yen Tong were quickly destroyed. The petals seemed to be endless, covering the sky and the sun. The attack of each petal was extremely powerful. At least, it was effortless to deal with Yen Tong's incarnations. As long as they were hit, they would be shattered. In the blink of an eye, more than half of Yen Tong's incarnations were destroyed. Moreover, Jun Wuya showed no signs of stopping his attack. It was not as easy as it was at the beginning. At this time, Yen Tong, who was hiding among the incarnations, had a serious look in his eyes. Jun Wuya's methods were indeed extraordinary. Facing his flame world, he had successfully destroyed it without any effort. It should be known that other than the evil god, there was no other person who could destroy his flame world so easily. However, Jun Wuya had succeeded. Just as Yen Tong was secretly shocked, Jun Wuya suddenly moved. The three Jun Wuya moved almost at the same time, and said in unison, "Found you!" As they spoke, the three Jun Wuya directly attacked Yen Tong's incarnation. Obviously, they had found Yen Tong's incarnation. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 23-23. After successfully locating Yen Tong's real body, Jun Wuya took a step forward and appeared in front of him in an instant. Yen Tong's expression changed abruptly, but before he could think further, Jun Wuya had already struck him with his palm. After successfully locating Yen Tong's real body, Jun Wuya took a step forward and appeared in front of him in an instant. Yen Tong's expression changed abruptly, but before he could think further, Jun Wuya had already struck him with his palm. A huge spiritual energy palm pressed down on Yen Tong like a mountain. In the face of Jun Wuya's attack, Yen Tong's expression turned solemn. He wanted to dodge, but unfortunately, with the three Pure One's incarnations present, Yen Tong could not do so. He could only take it head-on. The black flames in Yen Tong's eyes burned fiercely. In an instant, a black flame defense formed in front of Yen Tong. The spiritual energy palm bombarded the black flames. The two collided fiercely and then cancelled each other out. However, although Yen Tong blocked Jun Wuya's attack, he was completely besieged by Jun Wuya. The three Jun Wuya did not give Yen Tong the slightest chance to breathe. They besieged Yen Tong, and Yen Tong instantly fell into a disadvantageous position. Jun Wuya did not only have the three Pure One's incarnations. In addition, Jun Wuya had many other means, which were impossible to guard against. As the pressure increased, Jun Wuya's aura continued to rise. Soon, it reached the limit of the complete earthly venerable realm. However, this was not the end. Suddenly, Jun Wuya's aura seemed to have undergone a qualitative change. The originally terrifying aura quickly converged. For a moment, Jun Wuya gave off a simple and unadorned feeling. On the surface, Jun Wuya didn't seem as terrifying as before. However, at this moment, Yen Tong's eyes flashed with a hint of fear as he faced Jun Wuya. That's right, she was terrified. Looking at Jun Wuya, Yen Tong asked in a daze, "Have you really surpassed the Emperor realm?" Although Jun Wuya's aura was restrained, it didn't mean that he had become weak. On the contrary, the current Jun Wuya made Yen Tong involuntarily feel fear. At this moment, Jun Wuya's entire being seemed to have become one with himself, detached from the world. Although there was no terrifying aura leaking out, no one could find the slightest flaw in him. In the face of Yen Tong's shock, Jun Wuya faintly said, "It's only half a step." Without waiting for Yen Tong's reply, Jun Wuya took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of Yen Tong. He casually pointed his finger and a green light flashed. In the face of Jun Wuya's finger, Yen Tong's expression turned solemn. She stretched out her hand to block, but when the two collided, Yen Tong was sent flying. She couldn't block it. She couldn't block Jun Wuya's attack at all. Feeling the sharp pain in her arm, Yen Tong's expression became increasingly gloomy. If Yen Tong still had a trace of doubt about Purple Snake's evaluation of Junwuya before, then now, Yen Tong obviously didn't have the slightest doubt. Junwuya's strength was indeed boundless. In Yen Tong's opinion, only Lord Demon God could fight against Junwuya. The fighting spirit in her heart was quickly extinguished. Yen Tong didn't doubt that if they fought to the death, Junwuya would definitely have the ability to kill her. Immediately, Yen Tong's heart was filled with fear. In response, Junwuya said indifferently, "Do you think you can escape?" Since he had made up his mind to keep Yen Tong here, Junwuya naturally wouldn't let him go so easily. After saying that, Junwuya didn't give up. Once again, he launched a fierce attack on Yen Tong. Seeing that Junwuya was completely suppressing Yen Tong, the other sovereigns in the Great Thousand World not far away were also shocked. When Junwuya was in the Great Thousand World, he rarely fought, and even if he did, he wouldn't use his full strength. Therefore, it could be said that the sovereigns in the Great Thousand World didn't understand Junwuya's true strength. However, at this moment, Junwuya didn't hold back, and the strength he displayed at this time shocked the sovereigns. He's broken through to the sovereign realm. Tenzu was the first to notice Junwuya's change. As Tenzu in the Great Thousand World, he naturally knew many secrets that others didn't know. Therefore, at this moment, when he felt the aura emitted by Junwuya, Tenzu couldn't help but say. However, soon, Tenzu shook his head. Junwuya probably hadn't really broken through to the sovereign realm. He had only taken half a step. Even so, this was terrifying enough. At least, compared to Junwuya, the other sovereigns were obviously not enough. Everyone was shocked in their hearts, and the one who felt the most upset was undoubtedly Tao Ming. Everyone knew about the relationship between Hutian Gate and Swords Gate, and there was basically no possibility of reconciliation. But now Junwuya had burst out with such a terrifying battle prowess, which made Tao Ming feel shocked and terrified at the same time. If Junwuya had shown such strength at the beginning, Tao Ming would have been killed because in terms of strength, Tao Ming was not as strong as Yen Tong. At this moment, Yen Tong was almost unable to fight back in the hands of Junwuya, let alone Tao Ming. Damn it! Tao Ming cursed and looked at Junwuya with complicated feelings. At the same time, he felt despair for the future of the Katian sect. With such strength, Tao Ming knew very well that if Junwuya was determined to destroy the Katian sect, then the Katian sect would basically have no way to survive, because Tao Ming knew that he couldn't stop Junwuya at all. He once thought that he could compete with Junwuya, and even if he couldn't defeat him, the gap between them wouldn't be too big. But now, it seemed that this idea was simply a joke. Unaware of the shock in the hearts of the sovereigns, Junwuya only had one thought at this time, and that was to kill Yen Tong on the spot. Seeing that Junwuya was determined to kill him, Yen Tong's heart became heavier and heavier. In the end, Yen Tong had no choice but to use his last life-saving means. Yen Tong wouldn't use this life-saving means easily because the price was too high, but now he had no choice. If he didn't use this last life-saving means, he was afraid that he would really die here today. Junwuya, this king will remember today's matter. Yen Tong looked at Junwuya and shouted coldly. As soon as his voice fell, 2 lines of blood flowed out from his eyes. It looked extremely terrifying, and the black flames in his eyes became more and more vigorous. At the same time, the space around Yen Tong began to distort. Along with the distortion of space, Yen Tong's whole body seemed to merge into the space, and his figure became illusory. Yen Xing. With a low shout, the space where Yen Tong was directly formed a vortex, and soon, Yen Tong's figure disappeared. As for Junwuya's attack, it directly hit the air, and he couldn't hit Yen Tong at all. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 23-24. Even Junwuya could not react to Yen Tong's flame travel technique. It was beyond Junwuya's expectations that there was such a wonderful escape technique in this world. Junwuya could not react to Yen Tong's flame travel technique. It was beyond Junwuya's expectations that there was such a wonderful escape technique in this world. Originally, if Yen Tong had not chosen to escape, or if he did not have such a wonderful escape technique like Yen Xing, Junwuya had full confidence that he could directly kill him here. Unfortunately, in the end, Yen Tong still managed to escape. Although it was not difficult for Junwuya to see that Yen Tong must have paid a great price to use the flame travel technique, at least he managed to keep his life. Junwuya sighed helplessly and laughed self-deprecatingly. Haha, it seems that this old man was careless. How can a person like Yen Tong not have some extraordinary techniques that ordinary people do not have? It was just a pity that he missed the opportunity to kill Yen Tong. After all, Yen Tong had already escaped. What was the point of talking about it now? He quickly adjusted his state of mind. Following Yen Tong's escape, Zishi and the other evil sovereigns also left the battle and escaped without any hesitation. Before the evil sovereigns escaped, they naturally ordered the evil path cultivators to retreat. In an instant, the battle was over. The evil path cultivators around the spatial passage retreated into the depths of the flame wind realm. In this way, the battle between the two sides should have ended with the Great Thousand Worlds side winning. However, this was only the first battle. Although they had lost, it did not cause any fatal damage to the evil path cultivators. However, being able to win the first battle was a great boost to the morale of the Great Thousand Worlds side. As the biggest contributor to this battle, Junwuya was naturally surrounded by the sovereigns. Other than Dao Xiong and Luo Xing, the others were shocked by Junwuya's combat strength. Even Junwuya's attitude changed slightly. Tenzu looked at Junwuya and said with a smile, "Brother Wuya, you are really surprising. You hid your strength so well." Unknowingly, a trace of fear and respect for Junwuya grew in Tenzu's heart. It could not be helped. Although Tenzu's status was high, Junwuya's strength, to put it bluntly, could completely disregard Tenzu. If the sovereigns and Tenzu were on equal footing, then Junwuya was in existence above Tenzu. He did not need to care about the Great Thousand Worlds heavenly Tao because Junwuya had the ability to do so. Hearing the Heaven Race's words, the other sovereigns also spoke up. "That's right, Brother Wuya. You're too mean. After so long, we still don't know your strength. Tell us honestly, have you already broken through to the Emperor realm?" Faced with the repeated questions of the sovereigns, Junwuya could only smile bitterly. "Just half a step. I haven't broken through to the Emperor realm." Since everyone had seen his true strength with their own eyes, Junwuya simply told the truth. However, even if Junwuya had not truly broken through to the Emperor realm, this half a step left all the sovereigns present dumbfounded. It couldn't be helped. When one reached the Emperor realm, even the slightest improvement was extremely difficult, let alone taking half a step. This half-step gap could not be underestimated at all. Not only the sovereigns, but even Shao Chun and the other monstrous geniuses also looked at Junwuya at this time. Dao Ju even said excitedly, "Brother Shao Chun, your honored master is so strong." Dao Ju was also shocked by Junwuya's strength, but Shao Chun was a little speechless. Although he was Junwuya's disciple, Shao Chun did not know Junwuya's true strength. Therefore, when facing Junwuya at this time, Shao Chun's heart was the same as Dao Ju's. Shao Chun smiled and did not reply, but Dao Ju beside him said to himself, "Brother Shao Chun, since your honored master is so strong, why didn't he directly destroy the heaven-merging sect?" With the strength Junwuya had shown, it should not be too difficult to kill Tao Ming. It could even be said that if Tao Ming did not have Yen Tong's life-saving means, he might not even have a chance to escape in front of Junwuya. Shao Chun did not know why Junwuya did not kill Tao Ming, so he naturally could not answer Dao Ju's question. Surrounded by the crowd, Junwuya smiled bitterly. Then, the people of the major forces arrived at the Flame Wind Realm through the space passage and directly set up camp at the entrance of the Flame Wind Realm. Because they were in the starry sky, they simply stayed on the starships. Fortunately, there were many starships, tens of thousands of them, so it was not crowded with so many people. In the largest starship, the sovereigns and Xiao Chen were also discussing the next strategy. According to everyone's opinion, the space passage must be in their hands. Therefore, the sovereigns did not have the slightest objection and set up their base camp at the space passage. With the surroundings of the space passage as a foothold, this time they would clean up the evil warriors in the Flame Wind realm. Because of the strength Jun Wuya had shown, the sovereigns were full of confidence. From today's battle, it was not difficult to see that the evil masters on the evil warriors' side were no match for Jun Wuya. Although it was a pity that they did not kill Yen Tong today, Jun Wuya had the ability to kill those evil masters in the future. As long as Jun Wuya could kill even one evil master, the situation of the battle could be changed. At that time, the scales of victory would tilt towards the Great Thousand World. Everyone was very excited and at the same time, they were full of confidence, except for one person, and that was Tao Ming. Since the end of the battle, Tao Ming had not said a word. He sat there with a gloomy face and did not interrupt. Of course, he did not object either. The sovereigns could naturally guess some of the changes in Tao Ming. Obviously, it was because of Jun Wuya, because the stronger Jun Wuya was, the more panicked Tao Ming became. Although the Great Thousand World was now united to fight against the evil warriors, once the battle between the good and evil ended, the battle between the Sword Sect and the Heavenly Sect would definitely break out again. In this way, with Jun Wuya's strength, could Tao Ming stop him? It was impossible for Tao Ming to stop Jun Wuya. The sovereigns were also very clear that once the battle between the good and evil ended and the Great Thousand World won, the doomsday of the Heavenly Sect would probably come. No one was optimistic about the Heavenly Sect, because there was no one in the Heavenly Sect who could contend with Jun Wuya. When Tao Ming died, the Heavenly Sect would naturally scatter. Please add this to your collection, monthly vote recommendation. End of this chapter. Chapter 23-25. Tao Ming did not say a word, but one could tell from his expression that he was in a bad mood. While the sovereigns were discussing their next strategy, Zi Shi and the other evil sovereigns, who had retreated to the depths of the Flame Wind realm, gathered in the great hall of the Wood Spirit Sect. Tao Ming did not say a word, but one could tell from his expression that he was in a bad mood. While the sovereigns were discussing their next strategy, Zi Shi and the other evil sovereigns, who had retreated to the depths of the Flame Wind realm, gathered in the great hall of the Wood Spirit Sect. However, at this moment, the atmosphere within the large hall was a little solemn. All the evil sovereigns involuntarily looked towards the pale-faced Yen Tong. Yen Tong had almost died in the battle just now. If it were not for Yen Xing's life-saving means, he probably would not have been able to return. Thinking of Jun Wuya, the evil sovereign's expressions became incomparably heavy. With such power, who in the corrupt path would be able to stop him? Even Yen Tong had almost died. The others were definitely not Jun Wuya's match. Even Tao Ming was probably wishful thinking. No one said a word. The great hall was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Sensing that the atmosphere was becoming more and more oppressive, and that everyone's morale had been greatly affected, the seriously injured Yen Tong forced a smile and said, "As everyone can see, Jun Wuya's strength is indeed extremely powerful. It can be said that he has already surpassed the sovereign realm. Although he has not truly broken through to the sovereign realm, he has successfully taken half a step. None of us here is his match." Although there was a smile on his face, it was unknown whether it was because of his serious injuries, but his smile gave off a forced feeling. Hearing his words, the evil sovereign's originally ugly expressions became even uglier. Yen Tong's gaze swept across everyone. Seeing this, he paused for a moment before continuing. "However, although we are not Jun Wuya's match, the outcome of this battle is still very clear. Lord Evil God's resurrection is imminent. As long as we can resurrect Lord Evil God will naturally kill Junwei personally. At this moment, Yen Tong had no choice but to admit that Purple Snake's suggestion to revive Lord Evil God at all costs was indeed a wise move. It was also because the evil sovereigns had listened to the Purple Snake's suggestion and had already begun to revive the Lord Evil God. This gave everyone a glimmer of hope. Indeed, after hearing Yen Tong's words, anticipation flashed across the eyes of the evil sovereigns, who originally had ugly expressions on their faces. That's right. None of them were a match for Junwei, but Lord Evil God could. With Lord Evil God's strength, he could definitely kill Junwei. Fortunately, everyone listened to the Purple Snake's words and revived the Lord Evil God. This gave them a glimmer of hope. The smile on Yen Tong's face grew increasingly brilliant when he saw that the expressions of everyone present had turned for the better. Therefore, we don't have to be so disheartened. However, before Lord Evil God's resurrection, we can't let our guard down. We have to do our best to delay the attack of the Great Thousand World to ensure that Lord Evil God's resurrection is successful. After slaughtering all the living beings in the Flaming Wind World, Lord Evil God was currently being revived in the Sealed Land. However, this process would take time. According to estimates, it would take about half a month. During this half a month, Yen Tong's plan was to delay the attack of the Great Thousand World. Before Lord Evil God's resurrection, they would not engage in a head-on clash with the Great Thousand World. Everything would be decided after Lord Evil God's resurrection. If they were to engage in a head-on battle with the Great Thousand World now, the evil path would definitely be at a disadvantage. This was something that all the evil sovereigns present were very clear about. This was because no one was a match for Junwei. Furthermore, Yen Tong was now seriously injured, and it would be difficult for him to recover in a short period of time. If someone else were to deal with Junwei, they would not be as strong as Yen Tong. Therefore, stalling for time was the best method for the evil path. None of the evil sovereigns present objected to Yen Tong's words. This was because they all knew that Yen Tong's decision was absolutely correct. Seeing that everyone had nodded in agreement after listening to his words, Yen Tong was silent for a moment before he said faintly, "Since that's the case, let's continue with the Great Thousand World. In addition, we should speed up the pace of Lord Evil God's resurrection. At the same time, we have to closely monitor the movements of the Great Thousand World. If there are any abnormalities, we have to report them immediately." After saying this, Yen Tong's face revealed a trace of exhaustion. He did not have much energy now, and had to go into seclusion to recuperate as soon as possible. Although he had successfully escaped from Junwei by using Yen Xing, the price he had paid still made Yen Tong feel extremely pained. However, compared to his life, Yen Tong could still bear this price. It was a pity that Yen Xing could not use this method every time. Otherwise, even Yen Tong would not be able to bear it. At that time, he might not die at Junwei's hands, but at his own hands. The evil path side had made arrangements for what was to come next. On the other side, the sovereigns of the Great Thousand World had also made the same arrangement. After a discussion, the sovereigns unanimously decided to use the Tianwu Road as a breakthrough point. No matter what, they had to take down the Tianwu Road first. After that, they would march on the Flame Wind World and slowly erode the strength of the evil path. Facing the strength of the evil path, it was obviously unrealistic to want to win or lose in a single battle. They could only eliminate the evil path's strength step by step. Only then would they be able to settle the matter in one fell swoop. Their primary target was the Tianwu Road. However, at this time, another problem had arisen. Who would be the vanguard? At this time, Tao Ming, who had not spoken up until now, suddenly spoke up. "I have no objection to everyone's decision, but this time, I feel that the sword sect's contribution in being able to smoothly enter the Flame Wind World cannot go unnoticed. The sword sect has acted as the vanguard this time and fully displayed their strength. This is indeed something that all of us can learn from. Tao Ming actually took the initiative to praise the sword sect. It seemed like he was praising them, but upon hearing this, Xiao Chen frowned slightly. It was obvious that Tao Ming was not just praising the sword sect. He obviously had other motives. Looking calmly at Tao Ming turned a blind eye to Xiao Chen's gaze. Sweeping his gaze over the sovereigns present, Tao Ming paused for a moment before speaking slowly. The strength of the sword sect is obvious to all. This time, they have made a great contribution. Therefore, I feel that the sword sect should also be the vanguard when we attack the Tianwu Road. This way, our chances of success will naturally be higher. What do you all think? After saying this, Tao Ming's gaze fell on Junwei. His gaze was complicated. There was fear, but at the same time there was also hatred and unwillingness. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 23-26. Tao Ming proposed that the sword sect should still be the vanguard of the attack on the Tianwu Road. Upon hearing this, the expressions of the sovereigns present, as well as Xiao Chen and the others, changed. Tao Ming proposed that the sword sect should still be the vanguard of the attack on the Tianwu Road. Upon hearing this, the expressions of the sovereigns present, as well as Xiao Chen and the others, changed. There was an obvious chill in Xiao Chen's eyes. He had long guessed that Tao Ming was up to no good. Sure enough, this guy obviously wanted to use someone else to do his dirty work. Everyone present knew the consequences of being the vanguard. This time, the sword sect had been the vanguard, but their casualties were several times that of the other forces. After all, when fighting against the evil path, the vanguard naturally had to bear the brunt of the attack. On the other hand, the heavenly sect had not lost a single soldier in their attack on the Flame Wind realm. As the rear guard, they did not participate in the battle at all. They had already been the vanguard once, but Tao Ming still wanted the sword sect to be the vanguard again. This was indeed a little unsightly. However, upon hearing Tao Ming's words, the sovereigns present fell into silence. For a moment, no one spoke up to oppose. The atmosphere seemed to have become a little strange because of Tao Ming's words, but soon Xiao Chen also guessed the thoughts of the sovereigns. Junwei's strength was great, which was indeed a good thing for the Great Thousand World, but in addition, it also made the sovereigns feel threatened. Not only Tao Ming, but the other sovereigns also felt it. After all, for so many years, the Great Thousand World had always been filled with heroes, but suddenly Junwei, whose strength could almost crush the other sovereigns, had appeared. What would the others think? Would Junwei be the leader of the Great Thousand World in the future? They were all sovereigns, the top existences in the Great Thousand World. Naturally, they were unwilling to submit to Junwei. To put it bluntly, no one wanted to see the situation of the Great Thousand World dominating the world. Therefore, even though everyone knew that the purpose of Tao Ming's suggestion was to weaken the strength of the sword sect, no one objected to it. Everyone knew that Junwei was very strong, so weakening the strength of the sword sect was equivalent to restricting Junwei. For various reasons, the sovereigns and Tao Ming stood on the same front. Facing Tao Ming's gaze, Junwei's expression remained unchanged and he even smiled. Does everyone agree with Tao Ming's suggestion? Junwei said and swept a glance at everyone. Facing Junwei's gaze, no one dared to look back. After all, the sword sect had been the vanguard twice in a row. No matter how one put it, their table manners were a little too unsightly. Upon hearing Junwei's words, Luo Xing spoke up. I don't agree. Since everyone is in an alliance, how can we let the same force be the vanguard twice in a row? Luo Xing had always admired Junwei, so she naturally wasn't afraid of Junwei dominating the world. Moreover, she was a woman. However, following his words, Tao Ming immediately retorted. What's so unfair about this? Capable people do more work. Moreover, the strength of the sword sect is obvious to all. Letting the sword sect be the vanguard is obviously the wisest choice. Besides, now that the enemy is right in front of us, if we still scheme against each other, wouldn't we become a joke to the evil path? Tao Ming's words could be said to be filled with righteousness, but everyone understood his purpose. The reason why Tao Ming was so insistent was that he had no choice. He felt like he was riding a tiger and couldn't get off. Unlike the others, Tao Ming didn't just feel threatened by the powerful Junwuya. It could even be said that he was terrified. Thus, in order to protect himself, Tao Ming had to do everything he could to weaken and limit the sword sect's strength and development. Tao Ming insisted on letting the sword sect be the vanguard. Other than Luo Xing, the others neither opposed nor supported this. They didn't oppose Tao Ming because they also wanted to weaken the sword sect and limit its development. Otherwise, the sword sect would dominate the world in the future. They didn't support this because they didn't want to offend Junwuya. After all, Junwuya's strength was there for all to see. Even the Sky Ancestor kept his head down and did not say a word. After Tao Ming finished speaking, the rest was up to Junwuya. At this moment, Junwuya actually looked at Shao Chen and said, "Chener, you're the sword sect master. You can decide for yourself." Junwuya actually gave the right to decide to Shao Chen. Everyone present was stunned, including Shao Chen. However, when Shao Chen saw Junwuya's smiling expression, Shao Chen knew that Junwuya clearly felt that it was troublesome, so he was unwilling to make this decision. Thus, he simply threw this hot potato to Shao Chen. Shao Chen knew Junwuya's temperament very well. He didn't care about fame, power, or status. If it weren't for him, Junwuya probably wouldn't have joined the sword sect and become the old ancestor of the sword sect. Junwuya thought it was troublesome. In this regard, Shao Chen could only smile bitterly. However, there was nothing he could do. At this moment, under everyone's gaze, Shao Chen could only brace himself and stand up, bow to the sovereigns, and then slowly speak. Now that we are facing a great enemy, my sword sect is naturally unwilling to do anything to break the unity. Since everyone doesn't object to Senior Tao Ming's proposal, my sword sect can agree. However, there is one condition, and that is that the heavenly sect must also be the vanguard of the attack on the sword sect. From the reactions of the sovereigns present just now, Shao Chen had already guessed what they were thinking, so if he refused at this time, it would obviously offend everyone, and it would be extremely disadvantageous for the upcoming battle. Besides, if he offended everyone at this time, it would be tantamount to pushing the sovereigns and all the forces present to Tao Ming's side. At that time, the sword sect situation would become even more difficult. Since everyone chose to acquiesce because they were afraid of Junwuya's strength, then Shao Chen would go with the flow and accept the task of being the vanguard. However, according to Shao Chen's character, even if he had no choice, he wouldn't let go of the heavenly sect for nothing. Therefore, Shao Chen made such a request. Hearing Shao Chen's words, Tao Ming's expression immediately changed. "Shao Chen, only one vanguard is enough. Why do we need two?" Tao Ming didn't expect Shao Chen to make such a choice at all, but as soon as his voice fell, the other sovereigns also spoke up at this time. "It's not impossible to have two vanguards. After all, it's very important for us to take down the Tianwu Road. In this case, two vanguards can ensure that nothing goes wrong. I think Shao Chen's proposal is good. I also think it's good. You know, we can only succeed in this attack on the Tianwu Road. Therefore, I don't think there's a problem with the heavenly sect being the vanguard. Please add this to your collection, monthly votes and recommendations." End of this chapter. Chapter 23-27. The sovereigns spoke one after another. This time, they clearly expressed their support for Shao Chen's proposal. In response, Tao Ming's face was dark and gloomy to the extreme. The sovereigns spoke one after another. This time, they clearly expressed their support for Xiao Chen's proposal. In response, Tao Ming's face was dark and gloomy to the extreme. Xiao Chen had already guessed the reaction of the venerable sovereigns. First of all, he had agreed to be the vanguard here, so the venerable sovereigns could not say anything more. If they continued to oppose him, it would no longer be a matter of good manners. Secondly, the sovereigns originally wanted to weaken the strength of the sword sect. Since Xiao Chen had agreed to be the vanguard, it was not a problem to bring along the heavenly sect. After all, it was not their strength that would be lost. In this way, the sovereigns naturally could not object. Although the heavenly sect did not pose any threat, it did not matter to the sovereigns present that the heavenly sect's strength was weakened. Since it had nothing to do with them, what was wrong with them giving face to Xiao Chen? The other sovereigns spoke one after another in agreement. In the end, even though Tao Ming was extremely unwilling, he could only nod and agree. Like Xiao Chen, Tao Ming did not want to offend the public. In this way, the vanguard of the attack on the Tianwu Road would be the Sword Sect and the Heavenly Sect. Of course, the people in charge would naturally be the two sect masters, Xiao Chen and Yang Chen. As for Tao Ming and Junwuya, they would still be on the same side as the other sovereigns. They would only take action when Zixi and the other evil masters appeared. The meeting, which was full of schemes and ulterior motives, came to an end. After everyone had dispersed, Xiao Xiao and Xiao Chen looked at Xiao Chen. Xiao Xiao said with some displeasure, "These people are really too much. Even at this time, they still want to weaken the strength of the sword sect." Xiao Xiao could naturally guess what the sovereigns were thinking, but Xiao Chen didn't care much about it and smiled. It's normal. After all, no one wants to see the great thousand world dominate. But even so, we have to defeat the evil path first. If we lose, not only will the great thousand world fall into the hands of the evil path, but the entire great thousand world will also fall into the hands of the evil path. Xiao Chen snorted in dissatisfaction when he heard Xiao Chen's words. Junwuya's display of absolute strength boosted everyone's confidence, but at the same time, it also made many people wary. Xiao Xiao really felt injustice for Xiao Chen, but what could she do? Moreover, Xiao Chen could accept this outcome. Although the sword sect was once again the vanguard, didn't the heavenly sect also get dragged down by him? Besides, Xiao Chen already had a plan in mind for the next attack. Xiao Chen naturally couldn't just let them use the evil path to weaken the sword sect's strength. The sword sect was his own sect, and Xiao Chen certainly wouldn't just stand by and watch the disciples of the sword sect die in vain. Xiao Chen returned to his residence. When he returned to his starship, Xiao Xiao had already left and Junwuya was waiting for him. Seeing that Xiao Chen had returned, Junwuya smiled and pointed to the praying mat beside him. "Sit." Xiao Chen didn't stand on ceremony and sat down beside Junwuya. Junwuya personally made a cup of tea for Xiao Chen and then said slowly, "You don't blame me?" Junwuya was obviously talking about what happened in the meeting just now. During the meeting, Junwuya didn't refute the emperors and instead pushed all the blame to Xiao Chen. Hearing this, Xiao Chen smiled indifferently. "I know Master's temperament, and I also know that if Master had objected in that situation just now, the other emperors would inevitably feel conflicted and think that Master was using his power to oppress others." Xiao Chen really didn't blame Junwuya. Even when Junwuya had been hiding his strength before, Xiao Chen didn't blame him at all. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Junwuya also smiled and said, "With Master's strength, I can indeed kill Tao Ming and help you destroy the coiling heaven sect easily, but in that case, the sword sect will have one less whetstone. Remember, the sword sect's sect master is you, and the extent to which the sword sect can grow depends on you. A sect that succeeds easily is destined to not last long, understand?" Junwuya said. Hearing this, Xiao Chen also understood what he meant and nodded, indicating that he understood. In fact, Jun Wuya didn't kill Tao Ming in order to leave the Coiling Heaven sect to temper the Sword sect. However, Jun Wuya probably didn't expect Long Yuan's death. After all, no matter how strong Jun Wuya was, he wasn't a god and didn't have the ability to predict the future. After saying this, Jun Wuya finally looked solemnly at Xiao Chen and said, "Go ahead and do it. Master will be behind you no matter what." Xiao Chen understood Jun Wuya's character very well, and Jun Wuya also understood Xiao Chen's character very well. Xiao Chen was a person who absolutely refused to suffer losses. Even if he suffered losses, it was impossible for him to not do anything. Therefore, even though the Sword sect was targeted by the other sovereigns in today's meeting, in Jun Wuya's opinion, it was obvious that Xiao Chen wouldn't obediently give in. He must already have some ideas in his mind. Hearing Jun Wuya's words, Xiao Chen also smiled and nodded. Master knows me best. Xiao Chen did indeed have a countermeasure, and this time, he would definitely ruthlessly screw over the Coiling Heaven sect. While Xiao Chen and Jun Wuya were talking, on the other side, Tao Ming, who had also returned to his residence, was sitting together with his disciple, Yang Chen. Because the Coiling Heaven sect was in charge of bringing up the rear when they entered the Flaming Wind realm, Yang Chen didn't see Jun Wuya's massacre. Tao Ming didn't hide anything and truthfully told Yang Chen about Jun Wuya's true strength. Damn Jun Wuya, he deceived everyone. This old thing has been hiding his strength all this time. Previously, I always thought that even if I couldn't defeat Jun Wuya, I could at least contend with him. But now, it seems that I'm no match for Jun Wuya at all. If Jun Wuya really wants to kill me, I won't even have the chance to escape. Tao Ming didn't care about his face and spoke truthfully. At this time, if he still cared about his so-called face, then Tao Ming was really stupid. Jun Wuya's strength had exceeded everyone's expectations, so Tao Ming had to let Yang Chen have a new understanding of the Sword sect. He couldn't have those thoughts anymore and had to change, because Tao Ming was no match for Jun Wuya at all. Once the Coiling Heaven sect and the Sword sect clashed again, Tao Ming wouldn't be able to stop Jun Wuya at all. He couldn't be like before. If he wanted to deal with the Sword sect in the future, he had to change his method, because in terms of strength, the Coiling Heaven sect was obviously no match for the Sword sect, especially when there was a huge gap in strength between the two sovereigns. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 23-28. Hearing Tao Ming's curses, Yang Chen's expression was extremely interesting. All along, Yang Chen's goal had been to destroy the Sword sect and kill Xiao Chen. In Yang Chen's heart, his hatred for the Sword sect and Xiao Chen had already reached its peak. Hearing Tao Ming's curses, Yang Chen's expression was extremely interesting. All along, Yang Chen's goal had been to destroy the Sword sect and kill Xiao Chen. In Yang Chen's heart, his hatred for the Sword sect and Xiao Chen had already reached its peak. But now, Tao Ming was actually telling him that Jun Wuya had already taken a step out of the Emperor realm. Even Yang Chen wasn't a match for Jun Wuya. He didn't even have the ability to protect himself. Such news was no less than a bolt from the blue for Yang Chen. It made him feel like a deflated balloon. No matter what, he wanted to destroy the Sword sect. Moreover, even if Yang Chen could let go of the hatred in his heart, what about Xiao Chen? Would Xiao Chen let go of the Coiling Heaven sect? Now that the evil path cultivators had appeared, Xiao Chen couldn't spare any time to deal with them. But once the evil path cultivators were dealt with, would Xiao Chen allow the Coiling Heaven sect to do as they pleased? Therefore, whether Yang Chen was willing or not, he had to become enemies with Xiao Chen because the two of them had long since lost the possibility of turning enemies into friends. Yang Chen was also cursing in his heart. But now, Jun Wuya was like a mountain pressing down on the Coiling Heaven sect's head. He could burn the Coiling Heaven sect to the ground at any time. After cursing, Tao Ming finally calmed down and a cold light flashed in his eyes. No matter what, the most important thing for us now is to constantly weaken the sword sect's strength and use the evil path cultivators to cripple and injure the sword sect. So this time, do you know what to do when we attack the Tianwu Road? The Heavenly Sect and the Sword Sect were also the vanguard when attacking the Tianwu continent. Hearing Tao Ming's words, Yang Chen nodded and said, I know. Naturally, Yang Chen knew what to do. It would be best if he could use the evil Dao cultivators to kill Xiao Chen. That would be perfect. As long as Xiao Chen was gone, with Jun Wuya's personality, he probably wouldn't stay in the sword sect for too long. At that time, without Xiao Chen and Jun Wuya, what threat would the sword sect have? While the master and disciple were plotting against Xiao Chen, on the other side, Xiao Chen had already come up with a plan. The original plan was to attack the Tianwu Road early tomorrow morning. As the vanguard, the Sword Sect and the Heavenly Sect were naturally the first to set off. They had to be the first to attack the Tianwu Road. Early the next morning, the starships belonging to the Heavenly Sect and the Sword Sect slowly set off towards the Tianwu Road. But what everyone didn't expect was that the Sword Sect only had 2 starships. On the Heavenly Sect's side, Yang Chen had mobilized 20 starships, all of which were disciples of the Heavenly Sect. There were 70 to 80,000 people on them. On Xiao Chen's side, there were only 2 starships, and it didn't look like there were many people. Yang Chen naturally didn't agree with Xiao Chen's approach. He directly stopped Xiao Chen's starship and stood on the deck, looking at Xiao Chen and coldly shouting, Xiao Chen, what do you mean? What do you mean? Hearing this, Xiao Chen asked with a puzzled expression, Don't play dumb. You and I are both the vanguard, but you only sent so few people. Do you think we are all fools? Seeing this, Yang Chen immediately shouted coldly. Xiao Chen only sent 2 starships, which was obviously perfunctory. It was no wonder that Yang Chen was so angry. Originally, they planned to use the evil path's strength to weaken the sword sect, but Xiao Chen only sent so few people, so what else could they do? Following Yang Chen's words, the emperors who had been paying attention to the situation also had slightly darkened expressions. After all, Xiao Chen's actions were indeed a little excessive. Regardless of the reason why the sword sect was once again the vanguard this time, since they had already accepted this mission, for the sake of the overall situation, Xiao Chen shouldn't be so perfunctory. To put it bluntly, if only 2 starships were sent, it wouldn't make any difference whether the sword sect was the vanguard or not. The emperors were a little dissatisfied with Xiao Chen's approach, but soon Xiao Chen spoke up. What an idiot! Do you think I'm doing this perfunctorily and putting on an act? Isn't that the case? Yang Chen shouted. Open your dog eyes and see clearly, Xiao Chen said. Following Xiao Chen's words, the experts of the Sword Sect on the starship joined forces with the Sword Sect. First, Song Xing and the other deputy sect leaders were all present. Next, the Sword Sect elders, and the 10 sword maniacs' disciples were all present. It could be said that all the experts of the Sword Sect who were at the Comprehension Realm and above were all gathered here. Bringing all the experts of the Sword Sect who were at the Comprehension Realm and above this way, although Xiao Chen only sent out 2 starships, and the number of people was just a mere 20,000 in terms of quality, it was far superior to the Heavenly Sect. This was because looking at the people Yang Chen brought, 80% of them were ordinary disciples of the Heavenly Sect. There were only 2 End Realm deputy sect leaders, and there weren't many Dao Realm and Comprehension Realm experts either. It could be said that Xiao Chen and Yang Chen were 2 extremes. Xiao Chen walked the path of the elite. Although he didn't have many people, his combat strength was definitely not to be underestimated. As for the Heavenly Sect, Yang Chen only brought ordinary disciples. Yang Chen didn't bring many true experts and elites of the Heavenly Sect. Looking at Yang Chen's constantly changing expression, Xiao Chen curled his lips and said, Now I feel like you're doing this half-heartedly. Where are the experts of your heavenly sect? Why are there so few of them? Why aren't the others coming? Shao Chun could be said to have brought all the elites of the sword sect. As a result, the expressions of the sovereigns became much better. Although the sword sect didn't send many people this time, their quality was very high. In comparison, Yang Chun seemed to be doing this half-heartedly. After all, there weren't many experts of the heavenly sect. Regarding this, Yang Chen didn't know what to say. He could only coldly snort and then give the order to set off, heading towards the Tianwu continent. Looking at Yang Chen's back as he left, Xiao Chen's lips gradually curled into a cold smile. How could Xiao Chen not know what Yang Chen was thinking? However, this time, Yang Chen was probably going to be disappointed. He wanted to use the evil path's experts to weaken the strength of the sword sect, but who knew who would suffer in the end? Without wasting any time, Xiao Chen gave the order to set off. Soon, the two sects disappeared into the starry sky. Then, the experts of the Saber sect, Moon Palace, Heavenly Een Tower, Heavenly Policy Palace, and other sects set off one after another, following closely behind the Heavenly Sect and Sword Sect. Little brother, what are you trying to do? You clearly know that they want to use the evil path's experts to weaken our strength. So why did you only bring so few people? Moreover, all of them are the elites of the sword sect. If the losses are too great, it will be a big blow to the sword sect. In the cabin, Long Qing looked helplessly at Xiao Chen. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 23-29. Everyone could see through Yang Chen's scheme. Not only did Xiao Chen not object to it, he even seemed to be unprepared. Not only did he only bring 20 to 30,000 people, they were all elites of the sword sect. None of them were below the comprehension realm. After all, these people could be said to be the pillars of the sword sect. If they died, then the sword sect would be finished. Yang Chen had given the order to set out without saying anything. It was obvious that he was overjoyed. Although Xiao Chen didn't bring many people, they were all elite. If he could kill them all on the Tianwu continent, then the sword sect would lose half its life. Logically speaking, Xiao Chen should be like Yang Chen and bring a few ordinary disciples. Because even if they died, it wouldn't affect the sword sect too much. At most, they could just recruit a new batch of disciples. Xiao Chen said indifferently when he heard Long Qing's words. Second sister, you think that I should be like Yang Chen and bring only ordinary disciples. That way we can avoid casualties in the sword sect, right? Is that wrong? Long Qing said. Long Qing's words did make sense. Moreover, an ordinary person would make the same choice when faced with such a situation. However, Xiao Chen was different. Xiao Chen shook his head. I admit that second sister's words make sense. But wouldn't we be sacrificing those ordinary disciples for nothing? Although they are at the bottom of the sword sect, don't you think it's disappointing to let them die for nothing? But by doing so, we can at least preserve the strength of the sword sect. Long Qing didn't deny this, but she still insisted on her opinion. Even if the ordinary disciples were sacrificed for nothing, they could preserve the strength of the sword sect to the greatest extent. Long Qing didn't feel that she was wrong in choosing the lesser of two evils. But as the sect master of the sword sect, I can't let them come even though I know they're going to die. Since they've joined the sword sect, then regardless of their strength, they're still my family. I won't let them die for nothing. Xiao Chen told Long Qing and the others his thoughts. Moreover, Xiao Chen didn't hold back at all about what they needed to do next. In the beginning, they didn't understand Xiao Chen's actions. But after hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Qing and the others were stunned at first, but they quickly recovered. They smiled at Xiao Chen and said, "Little brother, you've really become bad. I have no choice. I was forced to do this. This time, I'll make Yang Chen bleed." Xiao Chen didn't care about this at all. Long Qing and the others all agreed with Xiao Chen's plan. They didn't think that Xiao Chen would be so evil, completely tricking Yang Chen. Yang Chen still didn't know that he had been tricked by Xiao Chen. At this moment, Yang Chen was indeed as Xiao Chen had thought. He was incomparably carefree. Haha, this Xiao Chen is simply an idiot. He actually brought all the elites of the sword sect. This time, if we can make all these people stay on the Tianwu road, then the sword sect will be completely crippled. Yang Chen laughed loudly in the cabin. He originally thought that Xiao Chen would only send out ordinary disciples like him. But who would have thought that the people Xiao Chen brought were all elites of the sword sect, and their cultivations were all above the comprehension realm. It was as if he could already see the decline of the sword sect. Yang Chen felt incomparably comfortable. Seeing Yang Chen in such a good mood, the two vice-sect masters of the heavenly sect also smiled. Indeed, Xiao Chen had given the heavenly sect a huge surprise this time. Both parties headed towards the Tianwu road. Soon, the Tianwu road was right in front of them. Although the Tianwu road was almost destroyed due to the battle between Jun Weihao and Zi Shi, more than half of it still remained. The outline of the Tianwu road could already be seen from afar. Standing on the deck, Yang Chen said with a smile, "We're here. We're almost at the graves of the sword sect's experts. Let me go and discuss with Xiao Chen now." Haha. Yang Chen laughed excitedly. Then, he took the initiative to go to Xiao Chen's spaceship. Xiao Chen didn't make things difficult for him. He invited Yang Chen into the cabin and the two sat opposite each other. Yang Chen said with a smile, "Xiao Chen, there was indeed some misunderstanding between our two sections. However, now that we're facing a great enemy, I still hope that we can put aside our misunderstandings and work together. After all, the evil path cultivators are our biggest enemy now." Yang Chen took the initiative to lower Xiao Chen's guard. In response, Xiao Chen also smiled and said, "You're right. Let's put our past grudges aside for now. Let's deal with the evil path cultivators first." "Good. Brother Xiao Chen is indeed reasonable. Come, let's toast to our cooperation." Hearing this, Yang Chen took the initiative to raise his cup. In response, Xiao Chen naturally didn't refuse. After the two drank their cups, Yang Chen finally went straight to the point. "Brother Xiao Chen, the Tianwu road is already in sight. The next battle will be the first. I see that Brother Xiao Chen has brought the elites of the sword sect. Why don't Brother Xiao Chen take the lead while my heavenly sect provides support from the side? What do you think?" Yang Chen naturally hoped that Xiao Chen would take the lead. As for the heavenly sect providing support, it was simply too fake. Yang Chen couldn't wait for all the experts of the sword sect to die on the Tianwu road. How could the heavenly sect provide support? Xiao Chen was also very clear about this. Therefore, when he heard Yang Chen's words, Xiao Chen immediately pretended to be angry and said, "Yang Chen, since we're going to work together, it's best that you don't use such underhanded methods. Let my sword sect take the lead? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? In my opinion, why don't we let your heavenly sect take the lead while my sword sect provides support from the side?" Xiao Chen pretended to be angry. Seeing this, Yang Chen also hurriedly smiled and said, "Brother Xiao Chen, please calm down. That's not what I meant." Then what do you mean? "Yang Chen, don't you know that I've brought the elites of the sword sect this time? Our numbers are already small. If you let us take the lead, isn't that the same as sending ourselves to our deaths? After all, even a fierce tiger can't withstand a pack of wolves." Xiao Chen coldly snorted. Xiao Chen's face was filled with anger. Seeing this, Yang Chen sneered inwardly. From the beginning, Yang Chen had never thought of letting Xiao Chen take the lead because he knew that Xiao Chen wasn't a fool and wouldn't agree to take the initiative. At this moment, looking at the furious Xiao Chen, Yang Chen seemed to take a step back and said, "Since that's the case, Brother Xiao Chen, why don't our two sects take the lead? Originally, we were both the vanguard, So it doesn't make sense for us to take the lead and provide support. Since that's the case, why don't we take the lead and attack together? This way, no one will suffer a loss. What does Brother Xiao Chun think? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 23:30. Yang Chen proposed that both sides attack together. Hearing this, Xiao Chen's expression improved a little and he said, "In that case, let's do it this way." Yang Chen proposed that both sides attack together. Hearing this, Xiao Chen's expression improved a little and he said, "In that case, let's do it this way." On the surface, Xiao Chen still seemed a little unhappy, but in his heart, Xiao Chen was already smiling. Both sides attacking together, this was Xiao Chen's plan from the beginning. Moreover, Xiao Chen was sure that Yang Chen would definitely agree. Now, Yang Chen actually took the initiative to propose, which was exactly what Xiao Chen wanted. Sharing the task of attacking together, this way, Yang Chen would completely fall into Xiao Chen's trap. Unfortunately, Yang Chen had no idea at this time. Seeing Xiao Chen nod in agreement, Yang Chen said with a smile, "Okay, then it's settled." After discussing with Xiao Chen, both sides agreed to launch the attack together when they arrived at the Tianwu Road. Then, Yang Chen said goodbye and returned to the Katian Sect starship. Looking at Yang Chen's back, Xiao Chen whispered softly with a smile, "This is called being too smart for your own good." Both of them had their own plans. Xiao Chen sneered in his heart, while Yang Chen, who had returned to his own starship, couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Haha, it seems that I overestimated Xiao Chen. I didn't expect him to be so stupid, haha." Yang Chen laughed heartily, while the two Katian Sect Vice Sect Masters next to him asked, "Sect Master, why are you so happy?" Facing the two's inquiry, Yang Chen truthfully told the two about his conversation with Xiao Chen. In the end, Yang Chen said with a smile, "Don't you think that Xiao Chen is so stupid that he's cute?" This time, he brought all the elites of the Sword Sect, while the people we brought are all ordinary disciples. If we both take on the task of attacking together, even if the casualties are the same, our Katian sect will obviously have an advantage. Even if our casualties are greater, it won't matter. However, Xiao Chen is different. The people he brought are all the pillars of the Sword Sect. Even if one of them dies, it will be a great loss for the Sword Sect, haha. Yang Chen was overjoyed. The way he saw it, Xiao Chen was caught off guard and fell into his trap. Now, all he had to do was to keep an eye on the casualties of the Sword Gate. Hearing Yang Chen's words, the two Katian Sect Vice Sect Masters also smiled. Sect Master is wise. Using ordinary disciples and experts of the Sword Sect in exchange for casualties was obviously a profit for the Katian Sect. However, would Xiao Chen really let Yang Chen have his way? Yang Chen seemed to have already seen the Sword Sect suffering heavy casualties, and was delighted. At this time, Xiao Chen also made a final show of respect. He gathered Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, Song Xing and the others together and explained his plan in detail. He also told everyone what they should pay attention to. While Xiao Chen and Yang Chen each had their own ulterior motives and were heading towards the Tianwu continent, Zi Shi and the other evil sovereigns in the Great Hall of the Wood Spirit Sect had already heard the news that the Great Thousand World was preparing to attack the Tianwu continent. However, Zi Shi and the other evil sovereigns weren't nervous at all. Just as we expected, the Great Thousand World's first target is the Tianwu continent. Since this is the case, we can proceed according to plan. Yen Tong was recuperating in seclusion, so he didn't appear. Zi Shi looked at the other evil sovereigns and smiled. "That's right, we should try our best to delay the attack of the Great Thousand World on the Tianwu continent and buy time for Lord Evil God," Qi Mei said with a smile. Previously, they had already expected that the Great Thousand World's first target would be the Tianwu continent. After all, the Tianwu continent was the continent closest to the space channel. They didn't plan to defend the Tianwu continent to the death. However, the other evil sovereigns wanted to use the Tianwu continent to buy time. Therefore, many evil sovereigns had gathered on the Tianwu continent. The task of these evil sovereigns wasn't to defend the Tianwu continent to the death, but to buy time and retreat as much as possible. Of course, it was also necessary to do their best to destroy the Great Thousand Worlds forces. Unaware of the other evil sovereigns' plans, Xiao Chun and Yang Chun had already arrived outside the Tianwu continent. Looking at the Tianwu continent in front of them, both sides brought their men to the deck. At this time, Yang Chun looked at Xiao Chun and smiled. "Brother Xiao Chun, shall we attack now?" "Of course," Xiao Chun nodded and said. "Well, then let's attack together," Yang Chun said with a smile on his face. As if they hadn't discovered Yang Chun's trick at all, the experts of the Heavenly Sect and Sword Sect attacked at the same time. They jumped off the starship and directly attacked the Tianwu continent. Xiao Chun and Yang Chun were naturally in the group. Seeing that Xiao Chun hadn't lied to him and had indeed turned out in full force, Yang Chun was overjoyed. At this moment, the last trace of worry in Yang Chun's heart completely dissipated. As long as he fought with the evil sovereigns, Yang Chun wasn't afraid that Xiao Chun would lie to him again. Therefore, Yang Chun let down most of his guard and even shouted excitedly at Gao Shun, "Kill!" Hearing Yang Chun's words, many disciples of the Heavenly Sect also rushed toward the Tianwu continent. At the same time, many evil sovereigns on the Tianwu continent who had been waiting for a long time didn't choose to retreat in the face of the attacks of the Sword Sect and the Heavenly Sect. Instead, they directly faced them. Since they wanted to buy time, they naturally couldn't just retreat. They had to fight. Yang Chun was secretly excited. It was as if he could already see the Sword Sect suffering heavy casualties. As the two sides exchanged blows, the tens of thousands of people from the Sword Sect were quickly surrounded by the evil sovereigns. This time, the Sword Sect had very few people. At this time, it was obvious that they were completely surrounded. Seeing this, Yang Chen's heart calmed down and he couldn't help but roar at the sky. "Haha, Xiao Chun, you idiot." However, Yang Chun held back in the end because this was clearly not the right time to say such things. The two sides engaged in a fierce battle. Because Yang Chun had gradually let down his guard, he didn't realize that the people of Sword Gate had gradually split into different groups and were slowly approaching the Heavenly Coiling Sect disciples. Initially, the evil cultivators only surrounded the Swords Gate disciples, but as the Swords Gate disciples moved, they gradually surrounded the Heavenly Gate disciples as well. They didn't notice this change at all. Of course, the people of the Sword Sect were very careful and didn't give themselves away. Looking at Yang Chun, who was still immersed in his excitement after killing an evil sovereign, Long Qing sneered at Xiao Chun and said, "This guy still thinks that we fell into his trap. Look at his expression, he's almost laughing out loud. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 23:31. Looking at Yang Chen's smiling face, Long Qing did not hide the disdain in her eyes. Hearing this, Xiao Chen also smiled and said, "Don't worry, he won't be happy for long." Looking at Yang Chen's smiling face, Long Qing did not hide the disdain in her eyes. Hearing this, Xiao Chen also smiled and said, "Don't worry, he won't be happy for long." Yang Chen did not sense that something was wrong, nor did he realize that not only was the Sword Sect surrounded, but even his Heavenly Sect's disciples were surrounded by the Evil Path's martial artists. Furthermore, as more and more Evil Path's martial artists arrived, the encirclement became more and more solid. Both sides fought fiercely. Looking at the Sword Sect's stance, it seemed like they really wanted to fight to the death with the Evil Path's martial artists. However, as time passed, one of the Heavenly Sect's vice-sect leaders finally realized that something was wrong. He killed his way to Yang Chen's side and whispered to him, "Sect leader, something's wrong. We're also surrounded. HM? Hearing this vice sect leader's words, Yang Chen glanced at the battlefield and frowned. Indeed, not only were the sword sect's disciples surrounded, but many of the heavenly sect's disciples were also surrounded by the evil path's martial artists. Although the situation was very chaotic, the evil path's martial artists had formed an encirclement surrounding the sword sect's and heavenly sect's disciples. Yang Chen naturally did not know that the reason why the evil path's martial artists were able to easily form such a huge encirclement was mostly due to the sword sect's martial artists. If the sword sect's martial artists had not deliberately moved closer to the heavenly sect's disciples and held back, giving the evil path's martial artists enough time to form an encirclement, it would have been very difficult for them to form such a large encirclement in such a short time. Although he could not be sure, Yang Chen had a bad premonition in his heart. He faintly felt that Xiao Chen was definitely plotting something. However, no matter how Yang Chen thought about it, he could not figure out what Xiao Chen was plotting. Because at this moment, not only were the heavenly sect's disciples surrounded, but the sword sect's martial artists were also surrounded. Xiao Chen was not able to escape unscathed. Could it be that Xiao Chen wants to die with me? Yang Chen wondered in his heart. However, he quickly shook his head and rejected this thought. Impossible. In Yang Chen's opinion, it was impossible for Xiao Chen to use all the elites of the sword sect to perish together with him. Even if all the ordinary disciples he brought with him were killed in the end, the loss of the heavenly gate would be far less than the loss of the sword sect. This was because even if all the ordinary disciples were killed, the elites of the heavenly gate would still be there, and the pillars would still be there. However, the sword's gate was different. Once all the experts of the sword's gate died, the sword's gate would be nothing but an empty shell. It was just like using porcelain to touch someone else's tile. Even if the end result was that the tile would break, it would definitely be the tile that had the upper hand. Yang Chen couldn't figure out what Xiao Chen was plotting. There was even a moment when Yang Chen wondered if he was overthinking things. However, just as Yang Chen was scratching his head in confusion, he heard Xiao Chen's voice. Damn it, there are too many evil path cultivators. Everyone, retreat. Xiao Chen gave the order to retreat without any warning. Hearing this, Yang Chen was stunned. What was going on? They were actually retreating? All of a sudden, Yang Chen looked at the battle in front of him. He saw that the experts of the sword sect had split into over 20 small groups. They were led by Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, Song Xing, and other end-realm experts as they started to break out of the encirclement. The 20 small groups instantly became 20 sharp blades that tore apart the encirclement of the evil path cultivators. This time, Xiao Chen didn't bring many people. Furthermore, they were all the elites of the sword sect. With such an arrangement, it was obvious that they were useful in breaking out of the encirclement. As they weren't weak, breaking out of the encirclement was like a fish in water. Furthermore, there weren't many people, so it was easier to command them. Unlike the heavenly sect, although there were many people, most of them weren't that strong. So at this time, the sword sect experts could break out of the encirclement, but the heavenly sect disciples couldn't. This was the use of elite. Seeing the sword sect start to break out of the encirclement and retreat, Yang Chen's face sunk. He immediately shouted, "Retreat, follow the sword sect people." Yang Chen's reaction wasn't slow. He immediately ordered the heavenly sect disciples to follow the sword sect expert. This way, with the sword sect experts leading the way, breaking out of the encirclement would naturally be much easier. However, how could Xiao Chen not have anticipated that Yang Chen would have such thoughts? Hearing Yang Chen's words, Xiao Chen revealed a faint smile and murmured softly, "That's right. Can you keep up?" Yang Chen wanted the heavenly sect to follow the sword sect experts and break out of the encirclement. Unfortunately, Xiao Chen obviously wouldn't give him this opportunity. Furthermore, with the strength of the heavenly sect disciples, It was simply wishful thinking for them to keep up with the sword sect experts. Hearing Yang Chen's order, the heavenly sect disciples began to follow the sword sect experts and break out of the encirclement. However, they simply couldn't keep up with the sword sect experts. On one side were the lowest level disciples, while on the other side were the true elites. Their cultivation wasn't lower than the comprehension realm. The difference between the two sides was obvious. Moreover, during the breakout, the sword sect experts followed Xiao Chen's instructions and deliberately led the evil path cultivators towards the heavenly sect disciples. Although the heavenly sect disciples wanted to follow the sword sect experts and break out of the encirclement, not only did they not succeed, but they also fell into a tight encirclement. On the other hand, many people from the sword sect successfully broke out of the encirclement. As for the evil path cultivators, they obviously didn't care whether you were from the heavenly sect or the sword sect. Seeing that the sword sect experts had broken out of the encirclement, the evil path cultivators turned to attack the heavenly sect disciples. For a moment, the heavenly sect disciples suffered heavy casualties and were completely surrounded by the evil path cultivators. Yang Chen could not help but roar in anger as he listened to the miserable cries of the Katian Gates disciples and watched as they fell and were killed one after another. At this time, if Yang Chen still didn't know that he had fallen into Xiao Chen's trap, then he really should buy a piece of tofu and kill himself. Now, Yang Chen finally understood why Xiao Chen had only brought so few people, and why they were all elites from the sword sect. It was to make it easier for them to break out of the encirclement and trap him. Damn it, Xiao Chen, you and I can't exist under the same sky. Yang Chen had completely fallen into Xiao Chen's trap. At this time, the sword sect experts had broken out of the encirclement, but the heavenly sect disciples had become scapegoats and were crazily surrounded and killed by the evil path cultivators. Just as Yang Chen was burning with anger, Xiao Chen's voice rang out. Brother Yang, the evil path cultivators are fierce. I'll leave first. Take care of yourself. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yang Chen spat out a mouthful of blood in anger. He turned and glared at Xiao Chen. Facing Yang Chen's glare, Xiao Chen actually smiled and waved his hand, causing Yang Chen to be even more furious. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 2332. Many of the sword sect's experts broke through the encirclement. This was the benefit of having a strong individual. As for the heavenly sect's disciples, because they weren't strong to begin with, and the sword sect had deliberately set them up, they were instantly surrounded. Many of the sword sect's experts broke through the encirclement. This was the benefit of having a strong individual. As for the heavenly sect's disciples, because they weren't strong to begin with, and the sword sect had deliberately set them up, they were instantly surrounded. But at this time, the heavenly sect's vice-sect master beside Yang Chen said with a grave expression, Sect master, let's retreat first. Where there's life, there's hope. Now wasn't the time to be angry. With just Yang Chen and the others' strength, there was no way to save the heavenly sect's disciples. The most important thing right now was for Yang Chen to break through the encirclement and escape. If he didn't leave now, even he wouldn't be able to escape. Xiao Chen, just you wait. I won't let this go. Yang Chen roared angrily at Xiao Chen. Then, under the protection of the heavenly sect's experts and the two vice-sect masters, he began to break through the encirclement. This time, Yang Chen could be said to have tried to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. He had originally thought that he would be able to ruthlessly trap the sword sect, but who would have thought that he would be the first to fall into Xiao Chen's trap? The funny thing was that he hadn't even noticed it. From the very beginning, Xiao Chen had set him up, and he hadn't been on guard. This time, Xiao Chen had clearly arranged everything for him. He had only brought a small number of elites in order to be able to escape as quickly as possible during the battle. This was clearly something that Xiao Chen had considered from the very beginning. Yang Chen was furious, but he couldn't question Xiao Chen right now because he was still busy breaking through the encirclement. On the battlefield, following the withdrawal of the sword sect's experts, only the heavenly sect's disciples were left fighting the evil path's experts. Facing the threat of death, the heavenly sect's disciples went crazy. There was nothing they could do. If they didn't kill the enemy in front of them, they would be killed. Therefore, the disciples of the heavenly sect could only do their best. The heavenly sect's disciples had suffered heavy casualties, but at the same time, the evil warriors had also paid a heavy price. Of course, in terms of numbers, it was obvious that the evil warriors had the absolute advantage. There was no doubt about this. Ignoring Yang Chen and the disciples of the Heavenly Gate, Xiao Chen, Song Xing, and the other vice-sect leaders and elders went to the sky not far away as promised after they retreated from the battle. Looking at the thousands of Song Xing before him, Xiao Chen took out a spatial spirit boat from his storage ring and handed it to Song Xing. Then, with a serious expression, he said, "Be careful. Rest assured, Sect Master." In response, Song Xing nodded heavily in response. Then, thousands of people boarded the spatial spirit boat and quickly disappeared from the spot. Xiao Chen naturally had his own reasons for letting Song Xing and the others leave. This was because from now on, Song Xing and the thousands of people were already dead in the battle according to Xiao Chen's word. Xiao Chen's motive was to let Song Xing and the others leave and pretend that they had died in the battle. As for where Song Xing and the others would go, Xiao Chen only asked them to find a secret place in the starry sky to hide temporarily. Although the Flame Wind world was filled with experts and evil paths experts from the Great Thousand World, it was impossible for every inch of the starry sky to be occupied by people from both sides. Therefore, it wasn't too difficult for a small spatial spirit boat to find a place to hide in the endless starry sky of the Flame Wind world. As for where the spatial spirit boat came from, it was naturally given to Xiao Chen by Junwei. The Sword Sect's spatial spirit boat had been destroyed long ago, so the Sword Sect didn't have a spatial spirit boat now. However, as the strongest person in the Great Thousand World, Junwei had a spatial spirit boat that belonged to him. This was nothing strange. After watching Song Xing and the others leave, Xiao Chen returned to the battlefield again. At this time, Yang Chen finally broke out of the encirclement under the protection of a group of experts from the Heavenly Sect. However, the disciples of the Heavenly Sect weren't so lucky. At this time, they were still bathed in blood and were trapped in the encirclement. As soon as he broke out of the encirclement, Yang Chen couldn't hold back the anger in his heart and immediately rushed toward Xiao Chen. Seeing Xiao Chen surrounded by Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, and the others, Yang Chen immediately shouted angrily. "Xiao Chen, you tricked me." Indeed, he was tricked by Xiao Chen. However, after hearing Yang Chen's words, Xiao Chen said with a puzzled look, "Brother Yang, what do you mean by that? When did I trick you? Just now, we were already surrounded and I ordered a temporary retreat. What's wrong with that?" Of course, Xiao Chen wouldn't admit that he tricked Yang Chen. In response, the anger in Yang Chen's eyes burned brighter. He pointed at Xiao Chen and was so angry that he couldn't speak. Now, the disciples of the Heavenly Gate were still struggling in a pool of blood, while the experts of Swords Gate were able to escape from the battle with ease. This made Yang Chen feel extremely unbalanced. Although the battle wasn't over and the casualties hadn't been calculated, Yang Chen was very clear that the Heavenly Sect would suffer heavy losses in the end. Because at this moment, the Heavenly Sect was fighting against the evil path martial artists alone. Such a battle was simply courting death. Although they had killed many evil path martial artists, many of the Heavenly Sect's disciples had perished as well. Facing the furious Yang Chen, Xiao Chen said with a smile, "Brother Yang, the formation just now was indeed bad, but you don't have to worry. I will go and support the Heavenly Sect disciples." After saying that, Xiao Chen glanced at Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing. Then, the two of them led the experts of the sword sect and joined the battle once again. Would Xiao Chen be so kind as to rescue the heavenly sect disciples? Hearing this, Yang Chen turned around and looked at the Sword's Gate disciples who had joined the battle once again. But it would have been better if he didn't look, because when he did, he almost coughed out another mouthful of blood. Although Xiao Chen said that he was going to rescue the heavenly sect disciples and the sword sect members had indeed joined the battle, the sword sect members didn't seem to have the slightest intention of rescuing them. Although they had joined the battle, they only did so from the periphery. As for the heavenly sect disciples who were surrounded, they didn't receive any reinforcements at all. Xiao Chen, without a doubt, Xiao Chen was clearly toying with him. Upon seeing that Yang Chen was about to scold him again, Xiao Chen interrupted him with a playful expression. "Brother Yang, I know you're anxious, but this is a battlefield after all. The slightest carelessness can lead to total annihilation. I know you're worried about the heavenly sect disciples, and so am I. But we still need to plan slowly to rescue them. Don't be impatient. I believe that the reinforcements will be here soon and they will surely be able to rescue the heavenly sect disciples. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." Chapter 23:33. Xiao Chen said with a mocking expression. Yang Chen gritted his teeth in anger. How could he not know that Xiao Chen had no intention of rescuing the heavenly sect disciples? He was just toying with him. However, Yang Chen could do nothing about it. Facing so many evil path cultivators, even if Yang Chen wanted to rescue the heavenly sect disciples, he was powerless. Of course, it was also because Yang Chen had left more than half of the heavenly sect's elites at the entrance of the spatial tunnel. Otherwise, he would have been able to rescue them. Unfortunately, Yang Chen had no one by his side. Yang Chen could only watch as the heavenly coiling sect disciples fell one after another, and there was nothing he could do. He then looked at the Sword's Gate experts who were just putting up an act, and his heart started to bleed. Yang Chen knew that they would definitely not rescue them now, so he did not say anything. He could only hope that the reinforcements would arrive as soon as possible. The battle was over. It could be said that the situation was one-sided. This time, the evil path cultivators had the upper hand. Many of the heavenly sect's disciples were fleeing like rats. Just as Yang Chen was about to lose all hope, the reinforcements finally arrived. The experts from the Saber Sect, Moon Palace, Heavenly Een Tower, Heavenly Policy Mansion, and other major forces arrived one after another. Seeing the reinforcements, Yang Chen could not help but shout, "Brother Yin Xing, Brother Yun, please help us." The Heavenly Sect, Heavenly Een Tower, and Mu Tianshan had a good relationship. Therefore, Yang Chen asked Yin Xing and Yun Tianyi for help. Hearing Yang Chen's words, Yin Xing and Yun Tianyi, who were standing on the deck, looked at the battlefield. With a glance, the two of them saw the heavenly sect's disciples surrounded by the evil path cultivators. Yin Xing and Yun Tianyi were stunned when they looked at the Sword's Gate experts that were patrolling the perimeter. What was going on? They were both the vanguard, but why were the heavenly sect's disciples heavily surrounded and suffering heavy casualties? On the other hand, the sword sect's side could do nothing in the periphery. They did not know what had happened, but looking at the current situation, if this continued, the Heavenly Gate disciples would probably be completely annihilated. After blocking it, Yin Xing and Yun Tianyi did not hesitate and immediately gave the order to attack. At the same time, Dao Ju and Xiao Xiao did the same. However, the two of them still went to Xiao Chen's side. Dao Ju looked at Xiao Chen curiously and asked, "Xiao Chen, what's going on? A disciple of the heavenly sect?" "Oh, Brother Yang said he wanted to show me the absolute strength of heavenly sect's disciples, so I accidentally went too deep." Hearing this, Xiao Chen said lightly, "Let Xiao Chen see the absolute strength of a Hetian sect disciple." and then accidentally went too deep? Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, Dao Ju and Xiao Xiao were both stunned. As for Yang Chen, he turned his head and glared at Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen, you… Okay, brother Yang, I saw it all. Yes, the strength of your heavenly sect's disciples is indeed not to be underestimated. Moreover, each and every one of them is not afraid of death. It really shocked me. Brother Yang, your heavenly sect is very lucky to have such disciples. Facing Yang Chen's angry roar, Xiao Chen did not wait for him to finish and directly interrupted him. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yang Chen's face was already incomparably gloomy, while Dao Ju laughed heartily without any scruples. Not afraid of death, my ass. Xiao Chen's words were simply to fool a 3-year-old child. With Yang Chen's personality, how could he possibly let heavenly sect's disciples be so fearless of death? Obviously, he was definitely tricked by Xiao Chen. Although they did not know what had happened, it was not difficult for them to guess what had happened just by looking at the situation before them. It was definitely Xiao Chen who had ruthlessly tricked Yang Chen. The fierce battle continued, but with the resources of the various major forces, the pressure on the heavenly sect's disciples was naturally reduced by a lot. Moreover, many of the heavenly sect's disciples had outstanding results. But even so, the heavenly sect's disciples still suffered heavy casualties this time. Almost half of them had died in the hands of the evil path's cultivators. Originally, there were close to 100,000 disciples, but now there were less than 50,000 survivors. Such casualties made Yang Chen have the urge to vomit blood. The heavenly sect's disciples broke out of the encirclement under the protection of the experts of the various major forces. Then, everyone launched a counterattack. In the face of the experts of the Saber sect, Moon Palace, and other major forces, although the evil path's cultivators resisted for a while, they soon chose to retreat. Regarding this, Xiao Chen and the others did not choose to pursue. After successfully setting foot on the Tianwu continent, everyone set up camp on the spot. Having just experienced a great battle, it was indeed not suitable to continue pursuing at this time, especially the heavenly sect's disciples. Due to the heavy casualties, they needed to rest and reorganize. They had successfully set foot on the Tianwu continent. Next, they needed to not only encircle and annihilate the evil path's cultivators, but also completely seize the Tianwu continent. However, at this moment, after settling down the cultivators of the various sects, Yang Chen did not care about what would happen next. Instead, he gathered everyone and prepared to denounce them. Yang Chen naturally could not swallow the anger of losing so many disciples for nothing. No matter what, he had to make Xiao Chen and the Sword Sect pay the price. For a time, Xiao Chen, Dao Ju, Xiao Xiao, Yang Chen, Yin Xing, Yun Tianyi, and the others gathered together in a starship. Yang Chen's face was ashen as he looked at Xiao Chen and shouted angrily. Xiao Chen, in the face of such a great enemy, you actually dared to trick me. If you don't give me an explanation for this matter, I will not let this matter rest. Yang Chen scolded angrily as soon as he arrived. There was no other way. After counting, the number of heavenly sect's disciples who had died in the battle was more than 50,000. As for the remaining disciples, almost all of them were injured, and nearly 10,000 of them were seriously injured. Such casualties had practically crippled the ordinary disciples of the heavenly sect. With such a heavy price to pay, Yang Chen naturally could not let this matter rest. However, after hearing Yang Chen's words, Xiao Chen said indifferently, "Oh? You were the one who acted rashly, and now you're blaming me? Is there such a reason? Acting rashly?" Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yang Chen gritted his teeth. Acting rashly, your sister. From the beginning, Yang Chen had never thought of acting rashly. To put it bluntly, Yang Chen actually just wanted to be a bystander, but who would have thought that he would be tricked by Xiao Chen? If the Sword Sect's experts had not suddenly broken through, his heavenly sect would not have suffered such a heavy loss. Therefore, all of this was caused by Xiao Chun. As for saying that he acted rashly due to his own greed, that was simply a joke. Immediately, Yang Chun shouted angrily. Xiao Chun, bullshit. It was clearly your sword sect that fled at the last moment, causing my heavenly sect's disciples to be besieged. If you don't give me an explanation now, I will definitely seek justice, even if I have to make a scene in front of all the sovereigns. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2334. Because the casualties of the heavenly sect disciples were too heavy, Yang Chun could not suppress the anger in his heart. However, after hearing his words, Xiao Chun coldly snorted. Scoff explanation? Yang Chun, even if there is an explanation, it should be me. You were the one who was greedy, causing you to be surrounded by evil cultivators. My sword sect risked our lives to save you, but in the end, you still dare to bite back. Xiao Chen's face was really ugly. Yang Chen was stunned. The sword sect risked their lives to save him? When the F***CK did this happen? One must know that in a normal battle, Xiao Chen didn't have any intention to save him. If it wasn't for the sword sect, Hetian sect wouldn't have suffered such heavy losses. A portion of the Hetian sect disciples could have broken out, but because the sword sect experts purposely attracted so many evil cultivators, the Hetian sect disciples were surrounded. But now, Xiao Chen actually said that he bit back? This was simply a venomous slander. Glaring furiously at Xiao Chen, Yang Chen roared. Xiao Chen, you what? It's obviously your heavenly gate's fault, but in the end, my sword's gate has to pay for it. You said that your heavenly gate suffered heavy casualties, but do you know that my sword's gate lost 3 vice headmasters in this battle, including vice headmaster Cangxing? There were also many elders, deacons, and elders. Yang Chun, tell me, don't you think you should give me an explanation? Cangxing died? The sword sect lost 3 End Realm deputy sect leaders in one battle? Hearing Xiao Chen's words, not only Yang Chen, but even Dao Ju, Xiao Xiao, Yin Xing, Yun Tianyi, and the others were stunned. One must know that the death of 1 End Realm deputy sect leader was a huge loss, not to mention 3 in one battle. If what Xiao Chen said was true, then the price that the sword sect paid was much more than the Hetian sect. They couldn't help but look towards Xiao Chen. Yang Chen was also stunned. The sword sect suffered such heavy losses? In that instant, Yang Chen actually had doubts. However, very quickly, he tossed this doubt to the back of his head. He definitely didn't believe that the sword sect would suffer such heavy losses. What a joke. They were just putting on an act and 3 End Realm deputy sect leaders died. How was that possible? Xiao Chen was completely twisting the truth. Very quickly, Yang Chen reacted. He pointed at Xiao Chen and hollered, Xiao Chen, don't go overboard. Your sword sect was just putting on an act from the start. How could there be such heavy losses? You are twisting the truth and confusing the truth. Yang Chen was sure that the sword sect didn't suffer such heavy losses because this was a normal battle. It could be said that the Hetian sect was fighting and the sword sect didn't do anything at all. Yang Chen hollered. Towards this, Xiao Chen's face was also filled with anger. Okay, Yang Chen, since that is the case, then let's meet in front of the emperors. I want to see if the emperors are as shameless as you. Cangxing and the others naturally didn't die. However, Cangxing and the others couldn't be found in the sword sect's camp. Therefore, in the eyes of others, Cangxing and the others were dead. Xiao Chen had expected that Yang Chen wouldn't let this matter rest, so he was fully prepared. Even if he made a scene in front of the emperors, Xiao Chen wasn't afraid at all. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yang Chen gritted his teeth and hollered, Okay, Xiao Chen, then let's meet in front of the emperors. No matter what, Yang Chen didn't believe that the sword sect would suffer such heavy losses. If that was the case, then he could only say that the entire sword sect was a bunch of idiots. However, after fighting with the sword sect so many times, Yang Chen knew very well that the deputy sect masters of the sword sect were definitely not weak. It was impossible for them to die so easily. After confirming that Xiao Chen was distorting right and wrong, Yang Chen immediately sent a letter to Tao Ming and told him about the incident on the Tianwu continent, adding oil and vinegar to it. According to Yang Chen, the sword sect clearly didn't care about the safety of the Great Thousand Domains. In the face of a great enemy, they actually retreated at the last minute, violating the agreement between the emperors and should be severely punished. Seeing Yang Chen send a letter to Tao Ming, Xiao Chen's face didn't change in the slightest. He had been watching everything with cold eyes, without the slightest intention of stopping it. He wanted to go to the emperors and get justice. Soon after, the crowd dispersed and waited for the emperors to arrive. After the first battle, the evil path cultivators retreated, and the crowd set up camp on the Tianwu continent. They could be considered to have gained a foothold on the Tianwu continent. Xiao Chen didn't care about Yang Chen's matter. He was very confident that even if he went to the emperors, he wouldn't be the one to suffer a loss. Soon a day passed. Tao Ming, Jun Huiyao, Dan Qingyang, and Yin Litian, the four emperors, came to the Tianwu continent together. The four of them came because of Yang Chen and Xiao Chen's matter, and also to preside over the attack on the Tianwu continent. The Tianwu continent was the first target set by the emperors, so it had to be taken down. When the four emperors arrived at the Tianwu continent, Yang Chen immediately went to complain. In front of Tao Ming, Yang Chen said with extreme grief and indignation, "Master, seniors, you must uphold justice for me. Since we are facing a great enemy, the Great Thousand Domains should be united against the enemy, but Xiao Chen, as the sect master of the sword sect, not only retreated at the last minute, he even framed my heavenly sect, causing more than 50,000 casualties," Yang Chen said with a face full of grief and indignation. Hearing this, Tao Ming looked at Jun Huiyao and said, "Brother Huiyao, what do you think of this matter?" Tao Ming and the other three knew very well that if what Yang Chen said was true, Xiao Chen and the sword sect would definitely be punished, because this was something that the emperors had already discussed. During the period of the alliance, no force could attack other forces, or they would be besieged by the other forces. The sword sect was no exception to this. In the face of a great enemy, internal conflicts were the most feared. Therefore, if what Yang Chen said was true, then Xiao Chen would definitely be punished. Even Jun Huiyao wouldn't be able to protect him, unless Jun Huiyao wanted to become enemies with the entire Great Thousand Domains. Tao Ming's tone was flat, as if it had nothing to do with him at all. However, at this time, a cold smile flashed in Tao Ming's eyes. Although the heavenly sect had suffered heavy losses this time, they were all ordinary disciples, so it wasn't too serious a loss. If they could seize this opportunity to punish Xiao Chen severely, or even cripple him, then in Tao Ming and Yang Chen's eyes, it would all be worth it. Exchanging 50,000 ordinary disciples for Xiao Chen was definitely a profit, without a doubt. However, after hearing Tao Ming's words, Jun Huiyao said indifferently, "We can't just listen to one side of the story. Let's listen to what Xiao Chen has to say before making a decision. What do you all think? Please add, please vote, please recommend." Chapter 2335. In the face of Tao Ming and Yang Chen's accusations, Jun Huiyao didn't seem to be worried at all. Dan Qingyang and Yin Litian also nodded slightly in agreement. Fine, let Xiao Chen come forward and confront him. Dan Qingyang was obviously on the side of the sword sect, but Yin Litian was on the same side as Tao Ming. This time, the sovereigns sent Jun Huiyao and the other three here because they had already thought it through. Jun Huiyao and Dan Qingyang were close, and Tao Ming and Yin Litian were on the same side. In this way there were 4 sovereigns and 2 against 2, which was relatively fair. If all the venerable emperors who were on good terms with Tao Ming or Jun Wu Yi were sent here, it would obviously be impossible to be fair and just. Therefore, even though Yin Litian wanted to directly convict Xiao Chen, there was nothing wrong with what Jun Wuya had said. It was impossible to punish Xiao Chen just based on Yang Chen's one-sided statement. This was indeed unreasonable. Even though Yin Litian didn't agree with Jun Wuya's suggestion, he still agreed with Jun Wuya's suggestion. Moreover, in Yin Litian's opinion, this matter was already set in stone. Even if Xiao Chen came forward, what harm could it do? Could Xiao Chen turn the tables when the facts were right in front of him? Soon, Xiao Chen arrived. But before Yang Chen's smile could fully bloom, Xiao Chen burst into tears as soon as he entered the room. "Master, seniors, you have to uphold justice for me." If Yang Chen's accusation was said to be filled with hatred, then Xiao Chen was bawling at this moment. Xiao Chen did not even bother to ask. He simply cried out loud, as if he had suffered a great grievance. Looking at Xiao Chen's appearance, Yang Chen was stunned. Even Tao Ming and Yin Litian, who were sitting on the main seats, were stunned. For a moment, they didn't understand the situation at all. Wasn't the heavenly sect being cheated? Why did it seem like the sword sect had been cheated? Xiao Chen's shout stunned everyone present. After a while, Dan Qingyang spoke first with a helpless smile on his face. "Xiao Chen, calm down. Tell me honestly what happened." Dan Qingyang couldn't figure out what Xiao Chen was up to, but soon, as Xiao Chen explained, the expressions of the four sovereigns changed. "Teacher, Vice Sect Master Tsang Xing has left. In this battle, 3 Vice Sect Masters of our Sword's Gate have fallen. As for the remaining elders, deacons, and elders, we have also lost over 1,000 people. This is all because of Yang Chen. He purposely set me up, causing the Sword's Gate to be surrounded by the evil cultivators. He has betrayed us and colluded with the enemy. If it wasn't for the fact that I was prepared beforehand, I reckon that our Sword's Gate would have been wiped out." The Sword Sect had lost 3 End Realm Vice Sect Masters? There were also thousands of elders, and deacons who had died. And the reason for all of this was because of Yang Chen's plot, causing the Sword Sect to be surrounded by the Evil Path's martial artists. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yang Chen couldn't help but shout, "Xiao Chen, you are slandering us. It was clearly your Sword Sect's plot that caused our Heavenly Sect's martial artists to be surrounded. You, Yang Chen, you are the one who is slandering us. Now you dare to play the blame game?" Hearing this, Xiao Chen roared angrily, his face filled with grief and indignation. One had to admit that Xiao Chen's acting was simply perfect. Looking at him, it was as if the Sword Sect had really suffered a heavy blow. Hearing the quarrel between Xiao Chen and Yang Chen, Tao Ming and Yin Litian frowned. If Xiao Chen's words were true, then the Sword Sect's losses were undoubtedly the greatest. And they couldn't punish Xiao Chen. Not only couldn't they punish Xiao Chen, but Yang Chen himself also couldn't escape punishment. After all, the Sword Sect's losses were so great that someone naturally had to take responsibility. Otherwise, what would the other factions think of them? When the time came, wouldn't the Great Thousand World collapse by itself? If Xiao Chen's words were true, then the Heavenly Sect's losses were nothing. Not only that, but Yang Chen also had to take responsibility and give an explanation to the other factions of the Great Thousand World. Even Tao Ming and Yin Litian didn't dare to cover this up, because it would incur the wrath of the other factions. Their expressions became very unsightly, but Tao Ming still said in a deep voice, "Xiao Chen, you say the Sword Sect's losses are great. Do you have any proof?" "What proof do I need? My Sword Sect's 3 Vice Sect Masters have died. Everyone knows this. If you don't believe me, you can send someone to verify it yourself," Xiao Chen roared in grief and indignation. Xiao Chen naturally wasn't afraid of Tao Ming sending someone to investigate. In any case, Tsang Xing and the others weren't here at all. What could he do when there was no proof? Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Tao Ming unconsciously glanced at Yang Chen. Clearly, Tao Ming was somewhat suspicious of Yang Chen. Could it be that Yang Chen had schemed to frame the sword sect? Now he's the one making the accusation? Sensing his honored master's gaze, Yang Chen was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. Even his honored master didn't believe him. Immediately, Yang Chen angrily said, I absolutely didn't scheme to frame the sword sect. Xiao Chen is slandering me. Humph, whether it's slandering or not, the sovereigns will know once they investigate, Xiao Chen coldly snorted. This time, Xiao Chen had made it clear that he wanted to kill Yang Chen. Not only did he want the heavenly sect to suffer heavy losses, but he also wanted Yang Chen to be his scapegoat. Moreover, the punishment that Yang Chen had to bear this time obviously wouldn't be light, otherwise it wouldn't be enough to convince the public. Seeing Xiao Chen so full of confidence, Tao Ming felt even more uncertain. At the same time, he was even more suspicious of Yang Chen. After all, Tao Ming was very clear about his disciple's temperament. Yang Chen was really capable of slandering others. However, if what Xiao Chen said was true, then wasn't Yang Chen too stupid? Since he had already schemed to frame the sword sect, was there still a need for him to make the accusation first? Did Yang Chen really think that the sovereigns were all idiots? Idiots? That they could punish Xiao Chen just because of his one-sided words? For some reason, Tao Ming was a little disappointed in Yang Chen. Sensing the change in his honored master's gaze, Yang Chen felt like he had to suffer in silence, unable to say anything. He was clearly the one who had been tricked by Xiao Chen, but in the end, why did it feel like he was the one making the accusation first? However, even though he was a little disappointed in Yang Chen, Tao Ming still had to side with him. Therefore, at this time, Tao Ming could only brace himself and say, Men, go to the sword sect's encampment and see if Xiao Chen's words are true. No matter what, they still had to confirm whether Xiao Chen's words were true. As for the rest, they could talk about it later. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2336. In the face of Xiao Chen's superb acting skills, Tao Ming had no confidence in his heart. He could only send people to investigate first to see if Xiao Chen was telling the truth. Seeing that even his own master did not believe him, Yang Chen's heart was filled with unspeakable bitterness. However, at this time, there was no other way. Yang Chen could only forcefully suppress the anger in his heart. However, his gaze was fixed on Xiao Chen. It felt as if he wanted to skin Xiao Chen alive. Unfortunately, in the face of Yang Chen's gaze, Xiao Chen did not move at all. He did not even pay attention to it, completely ignoring it. This time, even if I don't kill you, I will cripple you. On the surface, Xiao Chen looked calm, but in his heart, he sneered and thought to himself. He had planned everything from the very beginning, and the whole process had been very smooth. Yang Chen had jumped into the hole that he had dug for him without any warning. It could be said that until now, everything was going according to the script that Xiao Chen had planned. At this point, even if Yang Chen discovered something, it would be of no use. It could be said that he had arranged for Yang Chen to be cleared up. Xiao Chen was not worried at all. Soon, the people who went to investigate returned. The results of their investigation were exactly as Xiao Chen said. Everyone in the sword sect confirmed that Song Xing and the others were indeed dead. Moreover, they had also thoroughly searched the sword sect's encampment. Similarly, they did not discover the identities of Song Xing and the others. Basically, they could conclude that Song Xing and the others were dead. Facing such a result, Yang Chen was stunned at first. Then, he angrily shouted, Impossible, absolutely impossible. It must be Xiao Chen's trick. He must be deliberately mystifying things. Yang Chen did not expect such a result. The people of the sword sect had clearly broken through the encirclement at the beginning. How could they have suffered such heavy losses? He did not believe it at all. He insisted that all of this was Xiao Chen's doing. Unfortunately, although Yang Chen shouted angrily, he didn't have any evidence. After all, only the people from the Sword Sect and the Heavenly Sect were present during the battle. With the relationship between the two, the words of the Heavenly Gate's disciples were naturally not to be trusted. As such, it was difficult for Yang Chen to defend himself. By the time Dao Ju and the rest arrived, the Sword Sect had already joined the battle. It looked as if the Sword Sect had never retreated. Therefore, Yang Chen's words could not be verified. In the face of Yang Chen's angry roar, Xiao Chen coldly snorted and said, "Yang Chen, that's enough. My Sword Sect was set up by you, and we've been besieged and suffered heavy casualties. Not only do you not have the slightest bit of regret, but you also want to bite back. You've openly violated the alliance agreement of the many forces in the Great Thousand Domains. You've violated the alliance rules." With that, Xiao Chen turned to look at Junwei and the other three and said with righteous indignation, "Master, Senior, please uphold justice for my Sword Sect." The truth was right in front of them. Regardless of whether all of this was true or not, Yang Chen could not produce any evidence to refute it. Therefore, when they heard Xiao Chen's words, Tao Ming and Yin Litian's expressions turned ugly. Based on the current results, not only did the Sword Sect not have the slightest bit of fault, but they also contributed greatly. The Sword Sect had suffered heavy losses, so the alliance should compensate the Sword Sect. As for Yang Chen and uniting Heaven Gate, they would definitely be triggered. No one could change this fact. After all, the alliance was not decided by one person. Even if Junwei had absolute strength, it was impossible for him to fight against all of them. Tao Ming and Yin Litian looked at each other silently. They both knew that this matter was a little difficult to deal with. However, just as the two of them were secretly thinking about how to deal with this matter, Xiao Chen gave Junwei a look. Seeing this, Junwei smiled helplessly, but he still spoke. "The facts are clear. Since you've violated the alliance rules, you'll naturally be punished. Does anyone have any objections?" After hearing Junwei's words, Tao Ming and Yin Litian naturally did not dare to have any objections. After all, they were in the right now. However, while Tao Ming and Yin Litian remained silent, Yang Chen could no longer remain calm. He was clearly the one who was tricked by Xiao Chen, but in the end, he was the one who was punished. How could Yang Chen win? Immediately, Yang Chen glared at Xiao Chen and said fiercely, "Xiao Chen, I'll kill you." After saying that, Yang Chen directly attacked Xiao Chen. Seeing this, Xiao Chen sneered. Xiao Chen was not afraid of Yang Chen at all. However, just as Yang Chen attacked, before he could even touch Xiao Chen, a huge force directly threw Yang Chen away. The one who made a move was none other than Yang Chen's master, Tao Ming. Looking at his disciple, Tao Ming shouted with a cold expression, "You disgraceful thing! Don't you know where you are? How dare you make a move? Cram to the side!" Tao Ming had no choice but to stop Yang Chen. They were already in the wrong. If Yang Chen took the initiative to attack, it would only make things worse. Besides, Yang Chen attacked Xiao Chen. Would Xiao Chen be afraid? Not only was Xiao Chen not afraid, but he would only make things worse. When the time came, there would be no way to resolve the situation. After being shouted at by Tao Ming, Yang Chen felt extremely wronged. However, at this time, Yang Chen gradually regained his composure. Since things had already come to this, Yang Chen knew that he had been completely defeated this time. He had been completely tricked by Xiao Chen. There was no way he could fight back at all. If he continued to fight, there would be no good result. He could only admit defeat. Suppressing the anger in his heart, Yang Chen no longer spoke. At this time, Junwei said, "Let's invite the others." Without waiting for Tao Ming and the others to reply, Junwei directly contacted the other sovereigns through a sound-transmitting charm. Soon, the other sovereigns and Tenzu's soul avatars arrived. All the emperors gathered together again, and Jun Wuya told everyone the truth about what had happened. Tao Ming did not refute him at all during the whole process. As a sovereign, Tao Ming knew very well that if he refused to admit it at this time, it would only make everyone look down on him even more. As a sovereign, Tao Ming naturally wanted to save face. Not only Tao Ming, but even Yin Litian and Yun Chen, the two sovereigns who had the best relationship with him, chose to remain silent this time. Until Jun Wuya told the whole story, the three of them did not interrupt. After he finished, Jun Wuya said indifferently, "This is the situation. How do you think it should be resolved?" At this moment, Jun Wuya's face turned slightly cold. In the eyes of the sovereigns, Jun Wuya was angry because the sword sect had suffered heavy losses this time. In this regard, the sovereigns expressed that they could understand. After all, the death of 3 deputy sect masters was a loss that could not be ignored in any force. Please add this to your collection, monthly votes and recommendations. End of chapter. Seeing that all the sovereigns had agreed, Yang Chen looked at Tao Ming unwillingly, but Tao Ming just snorted coldly and said, "Fine, my heavenly gate agrees." Tao Ming agreed. Seeing this, even though Yang Chen was extremely unwilling, he couldn't refute. After all, Tao Ming had already spoken, so what else could Yang Chen say? The final punishment was thus decided. Not only did Xiao Chen severely cheat Yang Chen, but he also received a huge sum of compensation from Yang Chen. In the end, after comforting Xiao Chen and Jun Wuya, the emperors left one after another. Soon, only Jun Wuya, Tao Ming, Dan Qingyang, and Yin Litian were left in the room. Since the matter had been decided, Tao Ming didn't stay for long. With a cold snort, he immediately left with Yang Chen. After Tao Ming and Yang Chen left, Xiao Chen and Jun Wuya also returned to the sword sect's encampment. Jun Wuya naturally knew that Song Xing and the others weren't dead. Helplessly looking at Xiao Chen, Jun Wuya scolded jokingly, "Kid, aren't you a little too cruel?" This time, Xiao Chen had indeed cheated Yang Chen badly. Thinking back to Yang Chen's angry expression before he left, Jun Wuya felt a little apologetic. However, Xiao Chen didn't care much about this and said, "Since he's an enemy, there's naturally no need to be merciful. In any case, after dealing with the evil path cultivators, we'll definitely have a battle with the Heavenly Gate." Xiao Chen didn't show the slightest bit of mercy. In response, Jun Wuya smiled and didn't say anything. Just as Xiao Chen had said, the Sword Sect and the Heavenly Gate would have a battle sooner or later. It didn't matter whether they offended them or not. Seeing Xiao Chen return, Xian Yuanling, Long Qing, Gu Lingyao, Tian Yu and the others who had been waiting there for a long time immediately inquired about the outcome of the matter. In response, Xiao Chen smiled and told them the truth. Hearing that Yang Chen had been cheated so badly by Xiao Chen, they all smiled, especially Long Qing, who couldn't hide the excitement in her eyes. Long Yuan was in Tao Ming's hands, so Lin Qing naturally hated him to the bone. He had long vowed to destroy the Heavenly Gate to avenge Long Yuan. Now that Xiao Chen had cheated the Heavenly Gate, although he couldn't directly destroy the Heavenly Gate, it could be considered as collecting some interest in advance. "But little brother, what do you plan to do with Song Xing and the others? This matter won't be able to be concealed sooner or later." After the excitement, Long Qing asked worriedly. Xiao Chen had repeatedly said that Song Xing and the others had died, but this matter couldn't be concealed for too long. Once the battle was over, Song Xing and the others would definitely return. At that time, if the other forces found out, what would they do? Hearing Long Qing's words, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "If we can't hide it, then so be it." Chapter 2338. Looking at the enraged Yang Chen, Tao Ming snorted coldly with a gloomy expression. Who can you blame? You can only blame your own stupidity for jumping into someone else's trap without even realizing it. Along the way, Tao Ming also believed Yang Chen's words. Song Xing and the others were probably still alive, but who would believe all this? The other sovereigns would definitely not believe the one-sided words of this master and disciple. Hearing his honored master's scolding, Yang Chen did not dare to refute this time. Indeed, he could only blame himself for being too stupid and falling into Xiao Chen's trap. However, when he thought about how Katian's sect would have to be the vanguard and would definitely suffer heavy losses, Yang Chen was unwilling to accept this. Xiao Chen was clearly trying to weaken Katian's sect's strength, and Yang Chen could guess his purpose even if he used his toes to think. It was obviously to prepare for the destruction of Katian's sect in the future. Now that everyone was facing the evil path cultivators, they could only choose to join forces. However, once the battle between the righteous and evil paths ended, the Sword sect and Katian sect would definitely fight. At that time, if Katian sect suffered heavy losses in the battle between the righteous and evil paths, what would they use to fight against the Sword sect? Xiao Chen had already begun to plan how to destroy the Sword sect, which made Yang Chen angry and nervous at the same time. He did not want to fight to the death with the evil path cultivators, but this was the decision of the sovereigns. If Yang Chen did not follow it, it would be equivalent to offending all the forces in the Great Thousand World, including Tenzu. Yang Chen was angry, unwilling, and helpless. At this time, he could only look at Tao Ming. Meeting Yang Chen's gaze, Tao Ming, who was sitting on the main seat, also had a cold expression, but he said coldly, "Jun Wuya, Xiao Chen, if you want to destroy my Katian sect like this, you must be dreaming. This king will not let you succeed." Tao Ming's eyes were filled with coldness. Upon hearing his words, Yang Chen was stunned. Then, he asked expectantly, "Master, do you have a way?" That brat Xiao Chen wants to borrow the strength of the evil path to weaken our heavenly sect. He wants to wait until the battle between the righteous and the evil path to destroy the Sword sect in one fell swoop. What wishful thinking! You should know that all of this is only possible if the Great Thousand World is victorious. If the battle between the righteous and the evil path ends and the evil path wins, what will Xiao Chen use to destroy our heavenly sect? Tao Ming coldly snorted and said, "Even if Xiao Chen wanted to destroy the Katian sect, it was impossible for him to do so at this time." According to the previous discussion between the sovereigns, the Sword sect would no longer participate in the following battle, and the Katian sect would continue to act as the vanguard. In 2 days, many experts of the Katian sect had also arrived at the Tianwu Road. After all, the decision of the sovereigns was very clear. This time, the Katian sect could no longer hold back and had to go all out to act as the vanguard. Therefore, Yang Chen could only transfer many experts of the Katian sect to the Tianwu Road through the space passage. With the arrival of many experts of the Katian sect, a new round of attacks began, and the Katian sect naturally bore the brunt of the attack at the forefront. Moreover, regarding the task of being the vanguard, Yang Chen didn't play any tricks this time, and seemed to be faithfully carrying out the decision of the sovereigns. However, this was only on the surface. Secretly, Tao Ming had already sent a deputy sect leader of the Katian sect to secretly go to the depths of the Flame Wind Realm to find Purple Snake and the other evil masters to discuss the matter of the betrayal. In order to allow the deputy sect leader to arrive at the Wood Spirit sect where Purple Snake and the others were as soon as possible, Tao Ming deliberately gave the Katian sect's space spirit ship to the deputy sect leader. Originally, it would have been best for Tao Ming to go personally for such an important matter, but there was no other way. Tao Ming's identity was too special. As a sovereign, Tao Ming's every move was naturally watched by many people. If Tao Ming went personally or suddenly disappeared at this time, it would definitely arouse suspicion. Therefore, Tao Ming could only leave the matter to the deputy sect leader. On the surface, he asked Yang Chun to faithfully carry out the decision of the sovereigns, but secretly, Tao Ming had already sent people to discuss the matter of the betrayal with Purple Snake and the other evil masters. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. As he spoke, the smile on Zishi's face became even more bewitching. Hearing this, the Heavenly Sect's deputy sect leader did not dare to conceal anything. He immediately told Zishi the reason for his visit. This vice-sect lord had received Tao Ming's orders and had specially come here to convey that Tao Ming was willing to join Xie Dao's side and become an evil sovereign. Of course, Tao Ming also had his own requirement. When Zishi heard that Tao Ming wanted to accompany the Great Thousand Realms and submit to the evil Tao, a brilliant light flashed in his eyes. However, he still spoke without batting an eyelid. This is strange. As a sovereign of the Great Thousand World, Tao Ming wants to join us? Are you sure I didn't hear wrongly? No. Junior's words are not false. Hearing this, the Heavenly Sect's deputy sect leader hurriedly nodded and replied. Then, he told Zishi about the grudge between the Heavenly Sect and the Sword Sect. The reason was because of Jun Wuya's strength, which forced Tao Ming to betray the Great Thousand World and submit to the evil Tao. Tao Ming had sufficient reason to betray the Great Thousand World because if he did not, he would still die. After hearing the words of the Coiling Heaven Sect's vice-sect master, Zishi chuckled and said, "So that's how it is." However, since Tao Ming is the Coiling Heaven Sect's old ancestor, if he were to side with us evil warriors, what would happen to the rest of your Coiling Heaven Sect? Naturally, they will all join the evil Tao. Hearing this, the deputy sect leader respectfully replied. Tao Ming was the ancestor of the Heavenly Sect. If he betrayed the Great Thousand World, then everyone in the Heavenly Sect could only betray them. As for those who did not listen, they would be killed. This was something that Tao Ming had decided on long ago. Obviously, Tao Ming had thought of everything. In order to smoothly be accepted by the evil Tao, Tao Ming had specially presented a valuable gift, which was the Heavenly Sect's spatial spirit boat. When the Heavenly Sect's deputy sect leader took out the spatial spirit boat and said that it was Tao Ming's gift to Zishi, Zishi's smile became even brighter. It seems Tao Ming has already thought of everything. Alright, let's put away the spatial spirit boat. If such a precious treasure suddenly disappeared, wouldn't that raise suspicions? Furthermore, since Brother Tao Ming is so sincere, my corrupt path will naturally also show our sincerity. No matter what, Tao Ming was still a venerable emperor, and could be said to be in existence on the same level as Zishi. Since Tao Ming had taken the initiative to join the evil Tao, Zishi naturally would not disrespect him. Moreover, Tao Ming's joining would be of great help to the evil Tao. After confirming that Tao Ming did not seem to be lying, Zishi's attitude toward the Heavenly Sect's deputy sect leader became somewhat more polite. However, it was obviously impossible for him to join the evil Tao so easily and gain Zishi's trust. Zishi paused for a moment before continuing. Since Tao Ming has already made his decision, help me tell Brother Tao Ming that the evil Tao welcomes him very much. However, the current situation is complicated. Since Brother Tao Ming has chosen the evil Tao, then there are some things that need to be discussed at length. For the time being, ask Brother Tao Ming not to expose himself and continue to stay in the Great Thousand World Alliance. As for the battle on the Tianwu continent, ask Brother Tao Ming to delay it for some time. In short, do everything you can to delay it. Zishi's meaning was very clear. Let Tao Ming continue to stay in the Great Thousand World Alliance as a spy. Firstly, they could see if Tao Ming really wanted to join the evil Tao. Secondly, they could make better use of Tao Ming's existence. After all, compared to a direct betrayal, letting Tao Ming continue to hide was obviously more effective. Hearing Zi Shi's words, the Heavenly Sect's deputy sect leader did not dare to refuse. He immediately nodded in agreement, but still said that he needed to ask Tao Ming for instructions. After all, in front of Zi Shi and Qi Mei, the deputy sect leader was very clear that what he had to show was enough loyalty. Therefore, in front of the two of them, the Heavenly Sect's deputy sect leader directly contacted Tao Ming through a voice transmission talisman. He told Tao Ming exactly what Zi Shi had said and waited for Tao Ming to make a decision. Request collection, request monthly votes, request recommendation. No matter what internal conflicts there were in the Great Thousand World, now was the time for everyone to unite against the external forces. Hearing Dan Qingyang's words, Jun Wuya, who was opposite him, had a calm expression as if he was at ease. Seeing that Jun Wuya was ignoring him, Dan Qingyang was so angry that he blew his beard and glared at him. Brother Wuya, what time is it now? How can you still be so calm? Don't you know how big of an impact the heavenly Wu continent will have on the future battle if we can't take it? Brother Qingyang, then what do you think I should do? I don't know what Tao Ming is thinking, Jun Wuya said with a wry smile. There was definitely something wrong with Tao Ming, but he didn't know what Tao Ming was thinking now. Was it because of the previous matter, or was there some other reason? Just as Jun Wuya's voice fell, Litian took the initiative to come to the door. Seeing Litian, Dan Qingyang immediately said angrily, "What are you doing here?" Humph. Litian and Tao Ming were in the same boat. Now that Tao Ming's actions had made Dan Qingyang very unhappy, he naturally wouldn't be nice to Litian. In the face of Dan Qingyang's cold rebuke, Litian said indifferently, "Don't stare at me like that. I don't know what Tao Ming is doing. The big picture is more important. I still understand this principle. I have repeatedly sent messages to Tao Ming, but he hasn't replied to me. I came here to discuss with the two of you and see what's going on with Tao Ming." After saying that, Litian didn't stand on ceremony and directly sat down beside Jun Wuya and Dan Qingyang. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation,